welcome to Travel, Recreation and Wildlife. Thank you for making the time and being here today. Look forward to this day, especially after spending 2 days in corporations early in the week. It's great for me to get to TRW. I'll tell you that. So, would you please take roll for us? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is for the Joint Travel Committee for November 6th. Senator Boner,
Excused,
Senator Hicks,
excused,
Senator Jones, Senator Schuler, Representative Campbell,
Here.
Representative Connolly,
Here.
Representative Harshman, Representative Jarvis,
Here.
Representative Provenza,
Here.
Representative Storer, Representative Thayer,
Present.
Representative Worf,
here,
Co-Chairman Byron,
Here.
Chairman Landon.
here.
Pretty good showing.
Thank you.
State
That-
House.
Yeah, we do have a couple of our senators, you notice, are not here. Water has kind of conflicted this week, Select Water Committee, and so 2 senators have work that they're doing today on the water. We may see Senator Hicks a little bit later on today, after lunch perhaps. Mr. Co-Chairman, any thoughts, comments to get us started on the day?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm excited to be here. I'm glad you had a day off after that corporations meeting, and hopefully we can have a great meeting today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot more fun to talk about this stuff than election integrity. I'll tell you that. So just a couple of things, committee. This entire interim has really been an enjoyable experience for me, and I hope it has been for you. We set about, the co-chairman and I, to make it an educational year if we could. And we've touched on a lot of things that I think the state is looking at and being faced with. And today we're going to continue that effort. We're going to spend a little bit of time with industrial siting. I think that hopefully will be an educational experience. We have 2 or 3 bills that we will just throw in front of the committee so that we are aware of what we might see in the upcoming session in terms of individual bills. So be thinking about the opportunity at the end of the meeting today. I'm going to give each one of our committee members an opportunity to let us know if they've got any bills coming that may or may not touch the TRW committee during the session. So we can do that at the end of the meeting. But at any rate, please, let's keep decorum and professionalism at the top of the list. I don't think I have to say that in the room today. Let's get started with our Game and Fish Department. Consideration of, oh, you know what? I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, no. The minutes are approved with 1 stray vote. Okay. Representative Worf, if you want to turn on your microphone, did you?
Mr. Chairman, and I apologize because I read through this and there was a statement that was, didn't make sense. There was an extra repetition of like 3 or 4 words. Did you see that, Carly? Is that what you? Okay. I'll look for it, Mr. Chairman, because I think it's just semantics, getting the error. Nothing was inappropriate. It's just there was a typing error.
Okay, well, thank you, Representative. If you can find that, if you would share that with Mr. Fuller, I'd appreciate it. And I think the committee would be fine with a grammatical correction.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything. It's just a correction, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it, Representative. Thank you. So we're going to get started this morning with a consideration of a bill draft, LSO 192 version .4, landowner license limits. And Mr. Fuller, would you walk us into and out of that bill, please?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, and this is 2-01 in the online meeting materials. This is a bill draft that the committee requested at its August meeting and would authorize the Game and Fish Commission to promulgate rules to establish limits on landowner hunting licenses that are available in limited quota hunting areas. Page 2, line 11, we just go into 23-1-302H and add one sentence that just gives that rulemaking authority to the commission to limit the number of landowner licenses by rule. The bill would be effective July 1, 2026, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Fuller? Anything, Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fuller, I'm having deja vu that this was handled last week. Do you know the amendments that were added to this language? Would you walk the committee through them?
Fuller, this might be a good time, seeing no questions on the bill in front of the TRW committee this morning. Good time for you to maybe explain and help the committee know what has taken place elsewhere.
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, the Joint Agriculture Committee met last week and considered a bill nearly identical to this bill that is currently before this committee right now. The Joint Agriculture Committee sponsored two bills related to this topic. The first, just 26 LSO 176, started nearly identical. They had two amendments. The first would be to say that the commission can promulgate rules to limit the number of landowner licenses, but only when deemed necessary to maintain the public hunting opportunity. The second amendment provides that not less than 40% of the hunting licenses in a limited quota hunting area shall be issued to landowners. So their amendment basically says 40% is kind of the floor for that limit. They cannot limit further beyond the 40% for landowners. Then, Mr. Chairman, the second bill, 26 LSO 212, provides requirements for the issuance of transferable hunting licenses to resident Wyoming landowners. And just to walk through that quickly, this bill would provide that resident landowners shall qualify to use or transfer up to 2 hunting licenses per eligible species during each calendar year if available. Then, to be eligible to transfer any landowner license, the resident landowner must operate a farming or ranching operation within the state. Second, have the farming and ranching operation classified as agricultural land by the county assessor. And third, make a minimum annual gross income of $10,000 from the sale of agricultural commodities. Resident landowners, if they meet those 3 criteria, would be permitted to transfer a hunting license to any person who's eligible for a hunting license under Wyoming law. And then, Mr. Chairman, there was another amendment to that bill that I'm not sure exactly how that's going to look when it comes out. But I think the effect of that would be to repeal the entire subsection that's in this bill. So on page 2, line 1 of our bill would be to repeal that entire subsection effective July 1st, 2031.
Okay, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then just a follow-up question. This committee at the last meeting considered whether we wanted to bring a bill to sponsor for landowner transferable tags, and that motion did not pass. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, I do believe that's correct.
So, committee, we have some legislators who have been on these panels for a while, and they may want to also jump in on this. But just to help the committee understand this, what we face here is another committee taking up work that this committee normally takes up. You don't see that happen very often. In fact, statutorily, it's really up to the leadership of the legislature to provide topics to the committees that will be taken up during the interim. So we don't run into this very often, but sometimes we cross over into different lanes, and that's kind of what happened here. So we have a couple of bills out there developed by another committee that will go to the session. Our job today is to consider the bill in front of us, and then, of course, You know, anything that the committee, in terms of amendments, whatever, we can talk about those, but, Mr. Co-Chairman, any thoughts on this front?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Yeah, I think we need to get on with our business as it relates to this bill, but the freelancing and irresponsibility of that was executed by that committee was tough to watch. It was a tough half day to watch, trying to watch them go through what a hunting license is, how they are used. And, you know, we received a lot of direction from Management Council. And I know that leadership, when we get to session, and I hope they will note that. So I think we need to work this bill. We need to stay in our lane. And we need to do our committee work as TRW. And I think we're going to come up with a great bill. And I think we can have this discussion as we get to February. But that was a tough day to watch. And I really think I'm proud of the work this committee does. And I think we should put our head down and get to it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Any thoughts before we get to our department? I want to hear from them and some others on this little bill. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, just for my edification, was the other committee assigned this topic by manager? I mean, I don't know for sure. I'm just asking out of curiosity.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Fuller.
Mr. Chairman, both this committee and the Joint Agriculture Committee proposed landowner licenses as an interim topic. Management Council took a vote, and by a vote of 7-3 voted to assign that topic to joint travel.
Okay, thank you.
So one thing also occurred on the day that we presented our proposed interim topics committee, and it was a little different leadership directive. I'm trying to see how I can put this. There was a comment made that it's really up to the chairman and they can take up anything they want. So that was stated, and that's something brand new. That's in my 19 years in the legislature, I've never heard that before. So there's that little piece hanging out there, but it was voted to be sent to this committee to take up landowner licenses. So let's hear from our department. Let's get started with some comment on the bill. And Director, gentlemen, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Sorry you've got to go back over this, but let's take up landowner license. What do you think?
Oh, it's on. Just give it a tap. Tap the mic.
It actually, Director,
The light's not.
we were here for school facilities and we just told people, you know what, it's already on, so we're good to go. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Good to be here with you today. Angie Bruce, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish. Today with me, as you know, Chief Smith, Chief of our Wildlife Division, but also Commissioner Bell. He was also the chair of the Wildlife Task Force with me today. I brought a few other folks in the room that you'll hear from a little bit later on the next bill as well. So yeah, this subject, we continue. We've talked about it at our first two meetings with you guys. So I'll be pretty brief in my remarks and just provide an overall summary of what this does. I believe this bill gives the general hunter the opportunity to draw in limited quota areas of the state. As you know, there's been times in the past where landowners have taken up all or mostly the tags available in particular areas. Not a lot, but a few. And so by giving the commission this authority to set a cap or a limitation on how many tags go to landowners in a specific area, it would open that opportunity to the general public for them to have the ability to draw. So with that, I think I'll just pause and see if there's any questions on that.
Any questions? Committee, go ahead. Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I'm jumping the gun director, but with the amendment to not less than 40% of licenses, I'm just wondering if you could walk us through how many areas that's going to impact. Yeah, walk us through that.
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative, Joint Ag did put an amendment on their bill that limited that commission authority to not going any lower than 40%. So at least 40%, if they were to put a cap on an area, would have to at least give landowners 40% of those tags. I'll let that Commissioner Bell chime in on this question a little bit more, but the commission has not formally went through any rulemaking process or public process to understand what limitation they might put on. They would go through the normal public process in order to gain that understanding. But with conversations over the last several years regarding that, 40% seems reasonable. They haven't talked about going lower than that to any due degree, and they're pretty comfortable with that. And not saying a cap of 30% or a cap of 20%. Commissioner?
So Commissioner, welcome. I guess the question in front of this committee is what's magical about 40%?
Yeah,
Take it away.
Mr. Chairman, Rusty Bell, Game and Fish Commissioner. I was also one of the co-chairs of the task force, the Wildlife Task Force. And Representative Provenza, to try to answer that question and put a little bit of a historical perspective on how much time we spent on this landowner license issue. We had 18 months of Wildlife Task Force, and it seemed like we had one, sometimes 2 months or 2 meetings a month. And over that time, landowner licenses really rose to the top of the discussion because of the exponential growth over time and how many licenses are being given out. And we had a lot of discussion. What should that be? We pulled all the numbers from every single limited quota hunting area in the state and what the land ownership percentage was from public to private and what would that be? And honestly, there's not a magic number that is the same across the state. I think you'll hear from the stock growers that 40% is a reasonable number. I think that when we talked about it in the task force, that is probably a reasonable number. I think when we moved something forward that we wanted, it was around the 30%. And so I think what it does, it doesn't, it sets a cap, which is important. I think it's very important. I think this bill is critical for the future of Wyoming limited quota hunting areas because of that exponential growth, but because of other bills that we're seeing put through the legislature and other expansions of landowner license requests. But is there a magic number? I don't think there is for that percentage. Is 40% okay? In my opinion, yes, I think it's okay. We have not had that conversation with the commission. I would rather have it I like the simplicity of the bill in front of you right now. I think that gives us the authority. If we get to that situation where there's an area that has 80 or 90% public land and we're issuing 40% of the tags, the limited quota tags, is that fair? Maybe it's not fair. But this gives us the authority or the ability to make that different in different areas. And so, but ultimately, 40% is better than not having the bill.
So Commissioner, thank you for that. And committee, I guess when I thought about this about a year ago and watched the work of the Wildlife Task Force, thank you, Representative Campbell, by the way, for all the time spent. It just felt like to me that this would be well served with an all-encompassing, careful look. And that's kind of where the co-chairman and I visited. Let's get something started and then let's work it in a careful, collective way. And so that's kind of why this bill, I think, is a step. And then sort of serves as a springboard for work that we could do over the coming year to set this up properly. But Representative Campbell, thoughts?
Thank you.
Green light, please.
Yeah, see, mine's not on. Red means stop. Thank you. So I guess a hypothetical question, because as we work through this in the task force, it is a complex issue and there are a lot of things that tie in. So I guess a concern I have, if this authority is not given to the commission to set those caps, if hypothetically legislation were to go through making those licenses transferable. My concern is the number of landowners that currently do not put in for tags. And once perhaps they become transferable, how many of those will now flood to apply for the tags that maybe historically they haven't? And so what that might mean if a cap or that authority giving the commission the ability to cap is not in place.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, very good perspective. Right now, this is would be a tool for the commission to use and very limited at this point in time. So to give you a little bit of scope, Chief Smith offered me some numbers here with hundreds of hunt areas. The ones that are currently would that 40% would affect would be 1.7% of the hunt areas. So very small. And currently landowners are getting just under 3% of the license issued as well. But as you brought up is we anticipate that if landowner tags were able to be sold or transferred, the demand for it would go up. And as you guys know, I can't always control the supply, even though I'd like to offer more. But with a higher demand, we anticipate that 3% going much higher. And therefore, that would elevate the issue that we're trying to address with this current bill. So therefore, to me, this tool, given the authority to the commission to have this tool, would be even more needed.
Okay. Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I look at this, I don't want to undermine this process, but I question if it's even the appropriate time to be doing this. I know in conversations and testimony, I've asked the Game and Fish Department if they've gone out and actually confirmed or verified that the landowners that have been getting these licenses are still in fact eligible for them. We've heard that the mule deer herds in statewide, the objective's at 50%. And I think before we go monkeying around doing this, I think it's been mentioned by the director. It's very small portion that's being impacted. And the reality is we don't know. And I think the fact that the commission has said they will do this, they will go back, they will ensure that these landowner licenses are reviewed and that it's appropriate at the level that we've been doing it and make those adjustments. Because I do think now's a good time to do this, to have that review. And I think changing this, to me, just kind of mucks it up. I would rather see the commission have the ability to go out and assess everything first. And then after we know what the numbers are, it gives them the opportunity to talk all the landowners. And now Director Bruce would be able to come to us with all the information we need to make a decision, because she would be able to know of the eligible landowners, how many of them would be interested in obtaining licenses should they be transferable or now monetized. So I think myself, I'm going to speak against the bill, not because I don't support it. I just think it's premature. But I just wanted to point that out, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so Representative Wharf, I think that's exactly what the bill would do, is springboard us into those conversations and help us to get to that information that you allude to. At least that was kind of my vision of the thing. But Director, you want to make any comment in that regard? Deputy?
Mr. Chairman.
Chief, take it away.
Yeah, good morning. Representative Wharf, I appreciate those comments, and we have been directed by the commission to go out and reevaluate all those. I think the game wardens in the field are doing a great job. There may be a very few that have slipped through the cracks, as you're indicating. But overall, I think wardens are doing a great job on evaluating those, but we have committed to going back out in the next 3 years, reevaluating them all, and then on a regular basis following that to continue to reevaluate those. So as wildlife populations change, we can make sure that landowners are qualifying as they're supposed to.
Okay, thank you. Follow up. Go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't want this to be construed as me attacking anybody. I'm not saying that they've not been doing their job. I'm just saying we know that our mule deer population is probably the lowest it's been in decades. And before we go changing all of our statutes for a problem that may or may not exist, the point is they're already doing it. It's been said. I don't know that we need to make the changes. They've got the ability to go out and collect the data and then come back to us and let us know if they're monetized, how that changes the dynamic. Because I'm assuming that the wardens are talking to anybody that's got landowner or that's got license or land that would qualify for priority lands for wildlife, predominantly in the winter range. So now's a good time to do it, but I just don't think this is needed. But I want to make sure that this is not a criticism of anybody. I'm just pointing out that I think it's unfair to make changes when you guys don't have all the information. And I think we can start down that path without making any changes and then make the appropriate changes when we have that necessary information.
Thank you, Representative. I'm sure our wardens are working on it out there. So, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And there's certainly a few other hands that are going up here in the committee. And I'm going to speak or ask our House members we are here right now to ask questions. And if we want to comment on bills or make points, we can do that after we move the bill and have that discussion. So please limit it to questions. And with that, I will ask a question as is intended this time of day. And I don't know who it goes to up here, but how fluid could the commission be if this bill were to pass as is? You know, we're talking another committee and we're contemplating a set number, but how fluid could the commission be on with how often they meet, how often they have the ability to change items within, rulemaking authority? I think it makes sense to me to give this authority to the commission to recommend moving this number around if necessary. I just worry putting a set number in statute. We've heard from the Wildlife Task Force that 30% kind of rose to the top for whatever reason. We've had requests from other parties that have special interests in this conversation to go 40 or higher. So I'm trying to contemplate what would be the best way, because ultimately we are only meeting once a year, and hunting seasons and landowner applications to Representative Worf's comments. I currently receive a landowner tag and certainly would be voting conflict on all of these, because especially if it proceeds where we think some of this could go and this amendment, because I think there's a lot of conflict with all the landowners that will be benefiting from some of these bills and pieces of legislation. But ultimately, right now in the area that I hunt, there are a lot of ranches that could qualify but choose not to right now. But once some of these rules change, I think we're going to see a very different picture. So I'd rather a commission maybe be able to go about this because they meet more often and have more leeway, as opposed to a legislative body that doesn't hunt. A lot of our members don't engage in these activities. So could you, I don't know who wants to comment, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on as the bill is written, how that would affect things on your side of the discussion.
Director, you want to speak to the flexibility
thank you.
piece?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Definitely, we have 7 formal commission meetings every year, and we set our hunting seasons right now annually. So we go through the full public process every year. But at any time period, we can do an emergency rule and come forward really pretty quickly. You saw that after the bad winter of 22-23. We set extremely conservative hunting seasons, but we also didn't have all the data in. And we even spoke about this at the commission meeting, that we may come back to you once we get these other things in and reevaluate, and we did just that. Unfortunately, some of the population numbers and a few of the herds were lower than our models and the best science we had at the time predicted. So we came right back in, and before that hunting season made a change. So extremely fluid.
Okay, let's go to Representative Jarvis and then back to Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard that you said that currently 3% of the licenses go to landowners and that the possibility of it increasing. Do you have a max percentage that it could potentially go to if every single landowner took advantage of that?
No. It's a good question.
Is there a WAG out there somewhere, Chief?
Mr. Chairman, we did do some other work. I don't have it right in front of me, but we talked in the past about those minimum requirements to qualify, 160 acres, with also having the animal use days, et cetera. So a little bit hard without tasking our game wardens and our staff with a whole bunch of work to see where, if that animal use day is applied. You could start that conversation with looking at how many 160 acres in the state are there, and think about that as the maximum potential. But then also they would have to meet the other qualifications. So a little hard to do, absolutely. And that's really why a percentage works really well. So let me walk you through an example. Say that in a hunt area, there's 100 tags available for a species. And normal years, we have great population, great growth. On a regular basis, 50 landowners apply, and they're therefore getting about half. And then you say have a bad winter, and we lower that tag availability down to 50. Now, if the same 50 landowners apply and meet the qualifications, 100% would go to them. So maybe in normal years, a cap would not be needed, but there is times when it would be needed. So if you look at percentage, it seems somewhat a reasonable approach to the situation.
Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I was on the same wavelength as Representative Byron, because the first thing I was going to ask was how many meetings a month, or excuse me, a year. For some reason, I was thinking it was only 4, but you meet 7 times a year. So that helps me out a lot. But at those meetings, do you get updated data on the wildlife numbers so that the commission can make good decisions on those?
Yeah.
Director, go ahead, or Chief, either one.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler. So we collect data all the time. Compiling it and presenting it to the commission typically occurs once a year when we're setting seasons. But it would be, if there was a bad winter, then we do extra work and try to collect numbers then. And so at any of those meetings, we can present data to them because it is collected year round. We generally present that about once a year.
Representative Provenza?
Thank you. And to that, I would also say they have incredible public comment opportunities in people's home districts. So I've attended them in my county, and we have a beautiful office there. And so it's a great opportunity to get feedback from the public in a way that we don't hear. It's like an evening meeting instead of an 8:30 a.m. in the capital city, or here, I guess.
Thank you for that, Representative. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those lines, just to make sure it's clear in my head. So passing this piece of legislation through, giving then the commission that tool. So then would it be the case that within every area that maybe the commission identified as problematic, right? Maybe we need to set a cap here, even if it's within those 19, potentially affected areas. Would it be the case that in each of those areas, before a cap is set, there would be opportunity for that public feedback and input? So it may vary from area to area, depending on what the public input is.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, absolutely. We have always a 60-day comment period. We go through our whole APA process, public meetings, usually locally in the communities at night, like the representative talked about, and then the official commission meeting where they take additional public comment in order to make a decision.
Committee, anything else for our department folks? Okay, really appreciate all of you. We'll have you step back for a minute. We want to hear from other folks, but we reserve the right to fire another question at you here a little bit later. Thank you to the department. Let's hear from our constituent groups. I see our stock growers chief is here. Good morning, Mr. Magagna. Good to see you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
That is, it doesn't go green.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay, very
Yep,
good.
You're all set.
To learn some new tricks here.
Hold it nice and close for everybody to be able to hear you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to testify on this bill. Just a little bit of history. The 40% was actually an amendment that we brought to the Ag Committee. It also is what we had previously taken to the commission when they first began discussing a cap. Before they were advised that they lacked the legislative authority to impose a cap. They had talked about various numbers, and we had proposed to them 40% as being a reasonable floor on their ability to remove landowner licenses. And we think that's a fair number. I'm not saying that in every individual case, and these would be handled on an individual case, we would agree to 40%. In some cases, we might argue it should be 80%, but this gives them the flexibility to make those decisions with their knowledge, the information they get from the department on an area by area basis. And the concern we would have with not having any floor in this is that effectively that would enable the commission, should they choose to do so, to in some areas eliminate landowner licenses. And I think we can have all kinds of debates about the value of landowner licenses, whether we should or shouldn't have them. But as long as we do have them, I think there should be something to assure that the commission respects that and makes some appropriate amount of them available in every hunt area, so long as there are limited quota licenses available in those areas. So we're supportive of the 40% as being the floor in terms of that. The other point I would bring up, and I did, I believe, passed out to you this morning an amendment, but it's the same amendment basically. I will stay out of the issue of which committee should have the jurisdiction here. I certainly understand your comments and everything, but I would point out that if this committee would see fit to adopt that language, and both committees have bills coming forward to the session that are alike, I think that would significantly enhance the opportunity to move this bill through the budget session of the legislature, as opposed to having two bills that are distinct and then each bill gets assigned back to its own committee that created it. And that can be very cumbersome in the scenario that we're facing with the budget session of the legislature. So, Mr. Chairman, would encourage the committee, if you choose to move forward with the bill at all, that you would move forward with it with the amendment that has been proposed. And with that, I would be happy to entertain any questions.
Questions for the stock growers? So, Jim, I've got one. I'm trying to figure out in my mind how the interplay with, because I'm intrigued and I think we need to get to the opportunity for transfer of license. And I'm wondering how that comes into play with fluctuating landowner licenses. And would there be a circumstance where if you lost a landowner license, but we're still allowed to transfer a couple? I would hope that would be part of the conversation in setting up this program better and right on behalf of our stock growers. Does that make sense? Have you thought about that and how that comes into play?
Mr. Chairman, it does make some sense, and our perspective is we do support the idea of some transferable landowner licenses. Every state around us has that, and the pressure is on to do that here in Wyoming. But we think that's an issue that needs some careful study, analysis, compromise in how we do it. Not to take a position on these things, but just to throw out some issues for thought. Should a transferable license require a higher number of AUMs being provided or a higher acreage than just having a license that you can use yourself? That could be an issue for discussion. Should every landowner with two licenses be able to transfer both of them every year, or should there be some parameters on that? There's another issue for discussion.
Yeah.
Another thing that occurs to me, again, and none of these are positions of ours at this time, but if we're going to make landowner license transferable, there should be something in there for the hunting community as well. So perhaps some access requirements. One thought that I've had, again, just personally, is that in order to transfer a license, you have to agree to allow a certain amount of access. If you decline to do that, then perhaps a requirement that in lieu of that, you would contribute some portion of the earnings from your landowner license to the Access Yes program to enable Game and Fish to enhance access in another area. Those are just all topics that could be on the table in a careful analysis of landowner licenses and how we move toward a pattern of transferability.
No, I really appreciate that, Mr. McGagnon. And that's kind of in the back of my mind why I thought, let's be careful standing anything up without a lot of careful consideration here, because I think the entire panel up here cares a lot about our stock growers and our landowners out there. And we're inclined to move in some new direction, but I would just encourage all of us to be careful with it. Let's make sure we set it up properly. And I've seen before in all my years in the legislature, sometimes you can set something up on a knee jerk and it doesn't work. So any concerns with that, setting a floor before we even have a chance to really dig down and give ourselves flexibility from area to area, for example.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to be honest, I've been involved with the legislature as long and even longer than you've been serving in the legislature, and I would certainly agree with you on being cautious about knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
I do believe that this bill, with just this very small component, could still fit well in the interim until we move forward on other considerations, and likely would fit afterwards. But if it needed to be adjusted as part of a broader piece of legislation on transferable licenses, certainly you would have that opportunity at that point in time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. And thank you, Mr. McGagnon, for really hitting on some highlights there of how complex this issue is. And you were referring to some different opportunities that landowners might have to participate. I've been studying the Utah program, and it's pretty impressive that they get an allotted amount of licenses and then are the landowner is required to host a public land hunter, which is really an interesting concept to wrap my head around. And ultimately, I think given your position, do you view some of these discussions as a way to deal with some of our herds that are currently overpopulated? Or are you viewing this more of from the lane of the landowner that is hosting these animals and growing these animals? And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Mr. McGagnon, go ahead.
Co-Chair Byron, there's so much complexity that one of the things we hear often with regard to certain landowners is that because they don't allow hunting on their land, it becomes a haven for elk in particular during the hunting season. Right. If landowner licenses encourage them to grant some hunter access on their land, not only for the purchasers of those licenses, but perhaps a little broader, that might help disperse our population, help us with controlling excess herds. So that's just one example, I think, of many where landowner license could have a positive impact on the department's ability to manage our wildlife populations.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. McGagnon. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So right now the landowner license specific for elk is at least in my area is any elk, correct? So but I can tell you that in the landowner hunts I've been on and neighboring properties, there hasn't been a single cow harvested. Everyone that is hunting and is talking about contemplating the value of these potentially transferable licenses is obviously going after the big bull. But this bill specifically is talking, and your amendment is discussing the concept of 40%. Can you narrow down on the reason? And I know the Wildlife Task Force spent a lot of time on this, how that 40%, because we've talked about areas that are very different across the state, right? This 40% is going to be a blanket application to the entire state. So can you tell, for the limited dry areas. So can you tell me how your organization or the amendment you brought got to that number so I can better understand why that in terms of data and scientifically makes sense?
Mr. McGagnon, you want to take a stab at that?
I won't try and answer it from a scientific perspective because that's far beyond my talents. I will tell you, and 40% is not a formal position we've taken as an organization through any policy. Our membership may decide they want it much higher than that, and I would understand that. Where we came up with the 40% was saying, how do we give today, the commission lacks any authority to do this. How do we give them some meaningful authority? Because they are the appointed people responsible for the management of our wildlife in the state, and yet assure that they don't utilize that authority in a manner that diminishes the role of landowner licenses. If they could go down to zero, then in effect, they could do away with landowner licenses in a given area, at least, and as broadly as they chose. And so we felt that 40% gives them a significant amount of flexibility and yet still assures that we maintain the integrity of the concept of landowner licenses. We did add that other language in there that says that their decision has to be based on the need to provide opportunity for the general hunting public so that they're not making that reduction to 40% for some other unrelated reason that may or may not be acceptable to any of us.
Anything else, committee for our stock growers? Mr. Magagna, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you being here. Good morning. We'll keep moving through on whoever would like to come forward and testify, and you please come on up if you want to.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. Lots of discussion around landowner licenses. A couple of things with this bill, very supportive of what this bill is offering. I think it's a good first step to bring this discussion forward in a way that is thoughtful and step by step. A couple of the things that I keep hearing that I want to make sure that we talk about is, you know, landowner licenses and this discussion is a discussion about opportunity. It's who gets the opportunity. It's not about management. You know, Game and Fish is setting the caps where they know it needs to be. Who gets a landowner license and who doesn't has very little to do with, you know, how our herds are doing. The other side of this is, as I understand it, and I could be wrong here, and maybe this is a question, most landowner licenses are type 1 licenses, as you say, is the any elk. You're correct. It is mostly bulls that are being taken in this. That has very little to any population effect. So again, if these are not sort of discussions about, you know, will this fix our herds? Will this make mule deer better? Will this do stuff like this? It's a discussion about who gets the opportunity and who gets the opportunity in the state and what is fair there. I think there's a large discussion to be had about the value of the private lands in our state. I think that's something that Wyoming Wildlife has stood by consistently on seeing the value to our wildlife herds. There's also great value in the ability for a public land hunter to go out and fill their freezer, to have an experience, to make lifetime memories. All of that is valuable. So that's the discussion that we're having here. And it's often why the emotion gets so high around this, because we're talking about people's memories, people's livelihoods in the sense of how they create community. It's a discussion about opportunity. I'm really thankful for the thoughtfulness that this committee brings to this discussion and the deference that they give to both sides of the discussion with that. So I would really support this first step. I also want to point out, I understand, and I think that we can get on board with the 40% if that's what it's going to take to get this bill to move forward. I do, however, want to caution in the sense of, you know, our commission, at no point have I seen them come after landowners in any way that has been negative. They support landowners in the private land community so strongly. And, you know, in fact, when landowner licenses and a lot of the amendments that had been asked for from the hunting community, you know, whether we were dealing with acreage, whether it was sort of how we fix these large corporation situations that are happening that are affecting who's getting the opportunity. I saw our Game and Fish Commission listen incredibly intently to the landowner community and actually not move forward with any of those proposals that were brought because the landowner community said, no, this will hurt us. I think they have a long history of doing that. So I also would say, if the 40% needs to stay to move forward, we're still going to support this bill. But on the other side, I have a very strong feeling that our commission is going to look at the fairness and the opportunity and understand and empathize with both sides. They have done it consistently. They understand, they get the public land hunter, they get the private land discussion as well. I've never seen them come at it in a way that was harmful. Does that stop future ones? I understand that could be the question here. So again, wherever this bill with that 40%, if it needs to move forward, we will support that. But I just don't ever want it to be seen that our commission is negative in that sense.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Johnson, I'm looking at, I have just some of the percent draws of public versus landowners. Do you have a sense of what that 40% means for some areas? I mean, maybe it's anecdotal or overall numbers, but how many areas are landowners currently getting less than 40% and the public's getting more of, and would this impact?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, boy, I wish I had that number in my head. I have some friends that could pull that out immediately. I admittedly do not have that. I think it will be pretty, it is case by case across the state. There are going to be, and it's going to be case by case on if it's a resident landowner versus non-resident landowners. It makes a difference. Like, there are general areas for elk and deer for resident landowners where they don't get tags, but there are no everything's LQ for a non-resident landowner. So there's a lot of complication that comes up with this. I could not give you an answer on a specific number. What I can tell you is that each area is its own unique special little area, and it's going to have its own unique special little problems.
Go ahead. Follow up, Representative.
Maybe a different question, Mr. Chairman. We hear that other states have transferable tags and they're just fine. My understanding is that in some places, the landowners get a substantial size of those tags and, far surpassing 40% and are selling elk tags for $20,000. I guess, could you speak to how, that maybe the cap and what the other states have done, and if that's a model that we want to look at? Do we want to be like New Mexico?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can speak to do we want to be like New Mexico without an expletive, but no. I will say that there is a lot of different programs out there, mainly in a lot of the states that are in the West that are dealing with the public-private land discussion. In some instances, for instance, New Mexico, I know this year only 37% of public land hunters got antelope tags, and everything else was sort of taken up by auction and other sort of non-resident avenues. Again, that's New Mexico, we're Wyoming. I really believe that we can fix this in a Wyoming way, and we can come at it in a way that is like no other state, because Wyoming is like no other state. I also would say that we are a state that enjoys a great wealth of wildlife that, how lucky are we to still be fighting about if we get elk tags or not? There's a lot of states in the East that are having to bring elk in from the Rocky Mountains just to fight about having elk tags. So, we're in this place of privilege now, and fighting about the privilege is detracting in large part to the work that I see that we could do if we got together and maybe put our energy in places that were more beneficial to everyone. So I would just say that, there is an opportunity here to move this forward in a Wyoming way. I think we can trust our officials and the people that are in place to make good decisions with our wildlife, because they sure do hear about it when they don't.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Anything else for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation? What a great point, Ms. Johnson. I just want to say that dating all the way back to people like Norm Pape and today Reg Phillips, we're not going to leave our stock growers, not on my watch. This is a partnership. And I think that's why this committee cares so deeply about this bill and about this approach that we're going to take, is that it is good and balanced, and it's Wyoming. And anyway, thank you for your comments. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Representative,
I'm here.
it's good to see you. Yeah.
Question. Can you tell me, worst case scenario, if this bill that the travel and recreation have without the amendments that are being proposed, what's the worst case scenario if the travel and recreation bill were to pass as it is and then go back at a point, and if they need to have the cap on, go to the cap?
You know, I think, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. go ahead.
Worst case scenario, if this bill goes through as it, well, that's a pretty good case scenario in my mind, but I would highly expect to see within rules and regulations of this bill coming out, to see our commission take a good hard look at all of these areas that are in strife right now or causing conflict with whether too many landowner tags or where there is a perceived or real sort of unfairness. And I would expect our commission to take a really good hard look at that and probably come up with a rule that would be fair and actually protect landowners and hunters alike. I would expect them to come out with that in regulation if this bill passes without a cap, which is frankly usually where I see them do really nuanced work, where they could come at it from a case-by-case scenario if that's the basis. But if it passes with the 40%, I think they're still going to do that. I think they're still going to go take a good hard look at these places and figure out where they need to do work, talk to their people in the field and talk to the hunters and talk to the landowners. Anything that's going to go through is going to go through regulation. We're going to hear from both sides, and I hope we hear from both sides. So I see a very balanced thing coming out no matter which way it goes, but I would say that you see a pretty hard nuanced look at our areas if it passes as is.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Representative Conley, any follow-up? Are you good? Okay, thank you. Anything else, committee? Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? We are taking up 26 LSO 192 this morning. Landowner license limits. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this bill? Is there anyone online who wants to testify? Okay, I'm going to close public testimony committee. What's your pleasure on this bill? Okay, moved by Representative Provenza. Do I have a second? Seconded by the co-chairman. Discussion. Discussion on the bill. Are you ready? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make comment. I voted no on this bill in the Joint Ag Committee because I think it flew in the face of our legislative process. Wyoming has what I think is a good process, and I have immense respect for it. And the erosion of that process is, at least that's my perception of bringing that bill to that committee. I couldn't support that bill then, but I think that this bill has a lot of merit. I think that it's important that we put it forward as is, because I think that it respects and understands the process that Game and Fish goes through to hear public comment and talk with stakeholders from all sides of the issue. And one of the things that I think is important is that Game and Fish balances landowners and hunters. And I think that the process that the legislature has gone through with the transferable and what Joint Ag has done has put hunters and landowners at more of a division. And I don't think that serves the people of Wyoming very well. So I will be voting on this bill today. I support it. I think it's good policy. And I trust the Game and Fish and am grateful for the public process that they have in making their rules. And so thank you for that. And I hope the committee moves this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anything else on this bill? Are you ready for a roll call? Let's take a roll call on 192 this morning, landowner license limits. Thank you.
Senator Boner,
Excused?
Senator Hicks,
Excused.
Senator Jones,
Yes.
Senator Schuler, Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Jarvis,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
Aye.
Representative Thayer,
Aye.
Representative Worf,
No.
Co-Chairman Byron,
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have 11 ayes, 1 no, 2 excused.
Okay, 192 will go forward to the session. Gives us a great option and a nice place to start. Appreciate the committee's work. Let's move on and Department, I would ask you to come right back up and be prepared as soon as Mr. Fuller explains to us briefly LSO 200, Game and Fish Property Tax Exemption Amendments. That's an old friend, but Mr. Fuller, would you walk us through that one?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, you should have draft. This would be a version 0.4. This is 2-02 in the online meeting materials. This is a bill draft that the committee requested in August and is based on 2025 Senate File 99 engrossed. This draft would exempt certain property that the Game and Fish Commission owns from property taxation, and then similarly amends the requirements for the special tax imposed on commission-owned property. So, Mr. Chairman, what this bill draft is doing is amending the exception to the exemption of game and fish property. So starting on page 2, lines 6 through 9, this goes into 3911-105, and the language currently says the following is exempt from property taxation. Game and fish owned, commission owned real property is exempt, except for the property subject to the special tax that's levied. And then goes on to add language to clarify that the real property that is subject to that special tax is either used for wildlife management purposes or is furnished by the commission to employees as a place of residence. Then moving on to page 3, lines 3 and 4, this concerns the special tax, and it just says that there is imposed a special tax if it's owned by the commission and used for either wildlife management purposes or employee residences. The staff comment just includes subdivision 1 for the committee's reference. That references the property that's specially taxed for wildlife management. And then page 3, lines 27 and 28 goes in and says that for property used for employee residences, the tax is calculated in that second subdivision. Page 4, line 4, just says that nothing in this act deems to affect any assessment before January 1st, 2027. And January 1st, 27 is the effective date of this draft. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer questions.
Mr. Fuller, thank you. Committee, any questions on this bill? We worked this, our House friends worked it hard. I think the Senate worked it hard last year and it didn't quite make it through the process, but I think we're aware of what we're attempting to do here. Department, I would invite you guys back up if you have anything that you'd like to share on this bill. And then, of course, we'll open it up for others who would like to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up here to help me today is Chief Sean Bippy. He's the chief of our services division and all things land. So he's definitely the expert when it comes to our property taxes. Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about this one, and I think you guys know how we landed here. The department has a revenue issue. And what we're really trying to do over this last year, my first year as director, is look at every opportunity we can to stretch our hunters and anglers' dollars the farthest we can and be extremely responsible for it. So we've been doing all sorts of things. We even went through an exercise where we got rid of landlines because they were costing us too much, and we're all used to using cell phones anyway. So we're really turning over every rock. This is one item that would help us with that issue. We currently pay last year $860,000 in property taxes. We are, I believe, the only state agency that is required to pay property taxes on these state buildings. And so what would this bill do? It's written a little bit confusing because the exceptions to the exemption. So I have brought possible amendments for you to consider. It does not change the language of the bill. It just exchanges how it's presented. So with this bill, the impact to the department and the commission's funds would be that it would provide us with an additional $540,000 a year. Of course, we do know that taxes vary, so that was last year's amount. It would include the department no longer paying taxes on our game warden stations, our National Bighorn Sheep Center up in Buffalo, Du Bois, our Buffalo field office, our headquarter building in Cheyenne, and then our regional offices. We would continue to pay similar to a tax at an agricultural value on our lands. So our wildlife habitat management areas that we have around the state, as well as those buildings that are on those lands, such as our hatchery operations and so forth. And those are all at this point in time considered with almost an ag assessment, so relatively a low tax. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for the director? Any questions on this bill? Any other comments? Okay, appreciate it. We're going to go to others who would like to comment on LSO 200. This is the tax exemption bill, and Ms. Johnson, come on up. Welcome back.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll keep it really brief and just that we support this sort of approach. I think whenever we're finding dollars for our game and fish, our herds and our management and our wildlife benefit. And so how we balance the two, I know property tax is important for communities, but this seems like it strikes a good balance and just supportive of the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any questions, committee? Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to weigh in on the game and fish property tax exemption bill? Anyone else in the room? Do we have anyone online? Okay, we'll close testimony on the bill. Committee, what's your pleasure on this one? Oh, Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question, given the double negatives, and to clarify whether as the bill reads, the property furnished by the commission to employees in a place of residence, whether that is subject to property tax or not under the draft bill.
Come on up, Director. Thank you. I didn't fully understand the question. Did you get that, Director?
Because of how the bill was written, we got a lot of those questions last year during session. Again, I do have some possible amendments if you want to go with a interpretation of the same words in a little bit different manner. But how we view how the current bill is written is that this would exempt us from paying taxes on our game warden stations, which is a house and a resident, but also a public office where the public comes. However, we would still pay taxes on, say, other residential houses, such as those at, say, a fish hatchery. We have 2 or 3 houses at a fish hatchery. Less of a concern for us because that whole operation is usually assessed at the ag value. It's not pieced out in that case.
Does that help, Representative? Follow up?
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just in the case of the new properties in Teton County that are housing employees, would they be subject to the property tax or not?
Would you do us a favor just for the record and introduce yourself?
Trying to get them. There we go. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sean Bibby. I'm the Chief of the Services Division with the Game and Fish Department. Yes, Representative Storer, we're anticipating assessments to come in currently from Teton County on those homes. They reside on our South Park WHMA, so that'll be a assessment that we haven't quite seen yet, so we're anticipating a number coming in, but under the current language of the bill, we would certainly pay some taxes on those properties.
All right, thank you.
Further questions? Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Director Bruce, I was just wondering, do you have the breakout by county of just the impacts? I was just wondering if it really affects a couple more counties other than other ones, just to see what that would be.
Not with us. Mr. President, Senator, we can get that to you. We can break it out per each county and provide that to you. We don't have it with us today.
Thank you.
Anything else, committee? Director, can you both stay put?
Yeah.
Because I think we're about ready to work this bill. If it does receive a motion, and I'm interested in what amendments you might
Okay.
have as suggestions. So committee, that gets us through testimony. What's your pleasure on this bill? Representative Warp, do you have a question or a motion?
I do have a question, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
let's
and
back up and take another question.
I hate to say it, I don't think anybody can answer, I don't see anybody in the room that I think can answer this question, but I question how many other state departments provide housing for employees, because I think that's a rarity. I think that's one reason why the game and fish tax is taxed. I don't know, the only ones that I can think of that I know that provide housing is DOT. I know a lot of the rest areas have residents associated with those, but I don't know what other housing is provided by the state for their employees.
Representative, that's changed a little bit lately. There's some of that being provided in places of high impact, particularly over in Teton County. But I'm looking back at our state parks, our Department of Transportation, but we have housing that we have put in place over in Teton County to help with our teachers, with our deputy sheriffs. So there's a sprinkling out across, and maybe Representative Harshman, having spent all those years on appropriations, you probably have an idea here or there, but we've kind of gone through that. And I think the Game and Fish is somewhat unique, but we do have a sprinkling of other housing that we do provide. So I don't know if that helps, Representative, but yeah.
Mr. Chairman, it does help. And I know I was just told some of the education places where there's hard for people to get housing. There are some homes that are provided, but I'm one of these guys that, I don't want anybody paying taxes that shouldn't, and I want it to be fair. And that's the reason I ask is, should this be capturing more than the Game and Fish? I don't know. I'll have to take this up with the Revenue Committee when we meet in a couple of weeks, but that's the only thing I can say is if there's other entities that need to be captured, if we're going to make that amendment, we probably should make it for everybody. But that was just a question I had.
Representative, good thoughts. Of course, this one's constricted by the title and et cetera. And I'm sure we'll probably find out if we pass this bill. We may hear from somebody else. You never know. No, I think committee, one of the reasons this bill came forward is, and I don't have to tell the committee, but I will anyway, it's the sportsmen, it's the fishermen and the hunters who are paying this bill, and they're being taxed now to support our Game and Fish Department. And then we turn around and we tax them again to pay the property tax. And so, that's part of the genesis of this bill. And obviously the revenue picture is very concerning to us as well. So anything else? Let me try one more time to see if there's a motion on this bill, and then we'll continue to discuss it. Moved by Representative Provenza. Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Wharf. Now, any further discussion, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I really appreciate where Representative Worf was going with that. I was trying to figure out where this discussion was happening in another committee, and I snuck on and found out they are going to be discussing some government property tax exemptions in revenue here in a few weeks. And this bill previously did die in my drawer last session, and it wasn't for lack of me not wanting to potentially see this through, but we were really battling with the legal aspect of it, and I didn't want to move forward with a bill that could potentially be challenged and cost taxpayers more money. So I made that decision, and I was supportive to get it to my committee and voted for it when we were in our last interim. But yeah, I do think it will be hit on in a future meeting. And I struggle with the revenue side. You know, we don't have our County Commissioners Association, but I can imagine what his testimony would have been. You know, it's another bite of the apple where they reduce some, and I have the utmost respect for these game wardens and the offices and the people they serve and the offices they hold. But it also is, I'm challenged with this because they also have impacts on our county services and our roads and our first responders and our YDOT. And this is a tough one. I served on revenue with Chairman Harshman, and there's a lot of carve outs here, and this is going to be another one. And while that is an issue I struggle with, I also, as we all know, have proposed some great little bills to increase, non-resident fishing licenses is just $2 that never made it anywhere. And that would have been a great revenue source for Game and Fish. So they are really doing a great job. It was great to hear Director Bruce just mentioned they cut their landlines and just finding every way they can to save a penny because they are running so lean. So I think I'm going to certainly be in favor of this. And committee, I also think it's worth noting that this is just so we get it out of the meeting today. And I wanted to mention that on the other bill, the co-chairman and I, we have a lot more opportunity to work these bills when we get down to Cheyenne here in February. So I really appreciate it. I think it's a great bill in terms of the larger funding issue that we are facing with Game and Fish. And for those reasons, right now I am supportive. But just remember, committee, this is just one step in the many-step process.
Appreciate all those comments, Co-Chairman, that you're spot on. There's a bigger picture out there, and I know that we'll be dealing with that as we go. This one kind of focuses on the task at hand for our Game and Fish Department. So anything further? Let's take a roll call on 200, please.
Senator Boner,
Excused?
Senator Hicks,
Excused?
Senator Jones,
Aye.
Senator Schuler, Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Jarvis,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
Aye.
Representative Thayer,
Aye.
Representative Worf,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Byron,
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have 12 ayes, 2 excused.
So committee, we're chugging right along, and I'm inclined to take about a 10-minute break and come back to Mr. Parpin, who's going to visit with us about industrial siting. We'll also touch on a couple of things that I indicated we would save till the end of the day, but there are a couple of bills that I was going to just help the committee know are coming, just so you're aware of them. And that'll fit right in with the visit that we will have on industrial siting. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back shortly after 10 o'clock. We'll get started again. Okay. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping items, committee. We're moving along pretty well this morning and we're going to keep doing that. So our folks from the Arts Alliance and the Arts Council are here and they'll be ready when, and so chances are we will take a little bit earlier lunch break and we'll come back maybe even slightly before 1 o'clock and get started with our afternoon work. So I want to come back to the director of our Game and Fish Department for any other quick updates. We have a couple of issues we dealt with this interim. So take it away, Director. Thank you. It didn't sound like it.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
There we are.
there it is.
Thank you for giving us a few more minutes. First of all, I want to introduce a new face to you, Rihanna Jacobek. You will start to see her with us with legislative testimony in the future. We had a position in the director's office I left open for some time to think about our greatest need. And I really feel under the current federal leadership that we have an opportunity right now to not just respond to policy and different changes, but to really help shape them. And so I used this position to add some capacity to the director's office. And for example, one of the things we're working on is with Senator Lummis. We are working on Endangered Species Act reform, et cetera. So she's going to be serving in that capacity, and you'll also see her at the state level as well. And with that, I'll turn.
Welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you. Thanks. Thanks for that, Director.
You're welcome. And then one of our own ongoing topics that you guys are very familiar with is our Fishing and Outfitter Guide work. So Chief Osterlin is here today to give you an update on where the department is with that.
Good.
No.
There he is.
There you are. Good morning.
Good morning,
Thank you
Chairman.
for all your work this interim. We're anxious to hear where we are.
So Chairman Land and committee members, I'm Alan Osterlin, Chief of Fisheries. And I'm just going to give you a short update on House Bill 5 that passed last year. And we've been giving you updates throughout the interim session. So just want to continue that where we're at. We've got, as you know, the advisory boards in place. So we hit that goalpost. We've been given updates to TRW committee, hitting that goalpost. And the last thing we wanted to do this year was hit the goalpost of a regulation. So we drafted Chapter 71, which is our regulation that allows us to register watercraft for commercial outfitters and fishing guides. We went through the public meeting phase of that. Then we went to the commission. Commission authorized, approved the regulation back in September. And then as of October 24th, the governor's office approved it as well. So we're full steam ahead. We're hoping to have everything in place by early December so folks can get their boats registered before the new year. Certainly, it'll be in effect January 1st, 2026. So we've been working with our IT section and getting everything into place. We've been hesitant to really roll out any kind of communication until we heard back from the governor's office, which we have. So now we'll start to roll out communication and put more things on our webpage so people know where we're at.
Alan, thank you. Really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Co-chairman's been involved and others on the committee appreciate the department. And this really essentially rolls out in the spring, doesn't it? That's when our wardens and our staff are going to have to stand up something a little bit new, right?
Chairman Landon, yeah. And it actually depends on what part of the state you're in. With their tailwater fisheries, they'll be hitting it right off the first of the year. So.
Well, that's true. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman, and thank you for the work on that. You mentioned the advisory board, and they have certainly had an unbelievable lift through the last few months, and I thank every one of those folks and your staff for getting through that. What do you see as their role moving forward? And is there a statutory change we need to discuss, or is that, I mean, I certainly value where they are right now and what they can still come to the table with, but I think it's important as they really have great perspectives throughout every corner of the state. So my question is, what is their role moving forward? And as we head towards session, do we just let that lay, or do we have a discussion about it?
Chief?
So Chairman Landon, Co-Chair Byron, that's a great question. And we've talked, I've talked with the board about it. So they did a great job and we've got a really good board, really engaged. Like I told them, their recommendation, they wanted to wait until we had some numbers before making a recommendation where this thing would live. But as I advise them, anything that they do right now, it's not going to be lost, even if it goes somewhere else. That work that they're going to be done, whether it's looking at what's the next step as far as limiting watercraft, it's not going to be work that is not beneficial to the state. So we plan on keeping them engaged.
Co-Chairman, yeah, thank you. That is great news to me. I really do think that their expertise from all different perspectives is going to be valuable as we begin to get some of those numbers and helping drive this discussion. So that's great to hear that they will stay engaged. And I certainly think as we get into the next year, the committee can contemplate what that needs to look like maybe during the next interim and the tweaks that may or may not need to be made. So really appreciate them. And hopefully they're all out fishing right now, but I do appreciate their great work they did and thoughtful work and time they took out of their personal lives.
So Chief, I've got a quick question on another front. How are we doing on the hatchery front? And what about the walleye operation at Spies? Where does that stand? A couple of years ago, we had the awesome opportunity to visit and tour, and just wondering how's that stand up going?
Great question, Chairman Landon. So we've been running trials at Spies. That's probably what you saw, walleye, to see if we could raise them in an intense culture type of situation. And our folks in our hatchery culture section are amazing. And so they've been raising walleye. We've been stocking them out. And the whole purpose of that was at some point in time, we knew we were going to lose our out-of-state source of walleye, probably due to AIS concerns. So right now, the commission has approved us moving forward with expansion at Spies as far as a cool warm water where we could raise all the fish that we require, these species that we've been getting out of state. But they want to see where the bids are going to come out in at. Our engineering 100% design came in. It was above what the commission had allocated. So we're crossing our fingers. As you guys all know, everything's really expensive now and keeps on going up. And just want to make sure that we can do it. So that's where we're at with that project.
Yeah, thank you for that. That near and dear to my heart, that place we're talking about. I lived there when I was in third grade. So anyway, thanks Director, anything else this morning?
No, unless there's any other questions, just thank you guys for the opportunity.
Anything else for the Game of Fish? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is completely unrelated. But while I have you here, it actually was a conversation that came up in a city of Casper, city council meeting a few months ago, talking about the proposed Semino pump storage and the effects downstream that might affect us, especially in terms of trout numbers and changes to water. And so my question really is just how involved you guys have been in that process and providing some of that information to the impacts as far as our waters and our trout and how that might affect us.
Director?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll start with process and maybe the chief can add in some specific fisheries effects. Definitely reviewing all sorts of development that happens in Wyoming is a primary purpose of the department. We have a 6-person team that does that on a regular basis. And as we've talked about before with the next bill, we do about, anywhere from 500 to 700 of those reviews a year. This is one of them. We've been watching it closely. It's interesting because in this area, area. There's been a similar project come and go over the last 30 years multiple times, but none of them have really went forward. This one is in that phase. We continuously review and provide comments. In our review process, we work very closely with developers, no matter who they are, solar, wind, this pump storage project. And our role is not to say if it should go forward or not. You won't hear us say we support it or we don't support it. But what you will have us say is how we work really closely with any proponent to try to minimize the impacts to fish and wildlife. And so that's exactly what we've done here. We've worked very closely with them to help them understand what those impacts will be and if we can mitigate for them. There will be impacts to sage grouse and mule deer. I believe we can mitigate for those. However, there will also be impacts to the local bighorn sheep population, which I don't believe we can sufficiently mitigate impacts for those sheep, that sheep herd there, as well as the fisheries in the Miracle Mile. I don't believe we can come up with a mitigation proposal that would be sufficient in that case. But Chief, do you want to offer a little more detail on the fisheries impacts?
Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Director, Chairman. So yeah, we have been engaged, excuse me. Like Angie said, it's kind of really picked up speed here recently. From the fisheries perspective, we're concerned about the Miracle Mile, which is a blue ribbon hatchery. We're concerned about Seminole and the fisheries in there, potential entrainment and running through the system and losing walleye that way. The modeling could be shows it could be pretty substantial. So we have been providing comments on the water quality and as far as the Miracle Mile is concerned. In my mind, if something were to happen, like Director said, what then? You can't mitigate that. So it definitely concerning both in the reservoir and below.
Anything else, committee? Director, thank you.
Thank you,
Really
guys.
appreciate it. And maybe you'll be here for a few more minutes and we'll touch on a couple of bills that we may see during the session, probably as individual bills, but yeah, appreciate you guys. Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Fuller, how about, can you do us a favor and kind of springboard us into the next topic for our consideration on industrial siting, wildlife mitigation? This was actually prompted a little bit by a personal bill brought by Senator Hicks. And many of you may have seen that during the previous session. It's in your packet, and this industrial siting wildlife mitigation bill kind of prompts the opportunity for us to learn from our director and his troops, and we look forward to that. But go ahead, Mr. Fuller, if you give us a little overview.
So Mr. Chairman, this topic is an outgrowth of 2025 Senate File 134. And at the committee's first meeting in June, there was some discussion on industrial siting and wildlife mitigation. The committee elected to forward that to a subsequent meeting, and that brings us to today. The bill draft before you is from one of the committee members, Senator Hicks, 26 LSO 28. It's 0.53-01 in the meeting materials. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to go line by line through the bill draft, but in principle, what the draft would do is establish a process by which industrial siting applicants may be called upon to pay wildlife mitigation impact costs. These costs would be available to the Game and Fish Department, as well as the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust Account Board. So those two entities could apply as part of the industrial siting application process to have, and this is where it's a little different from the current impact payments, which are paid from sales and use taxes to local governments. This would allow these two state agencies to apply and then receive payments from the industrial siting applicant, from the project proponent to pay those costs. The bulk of the bill is generally pages 2 through about page 5 that just outlines the process by which those two entities could seek these payments. They could also work with the applicant itself to reach an agreement on a payment. And then the remainder of the bill, Mr. Chairman, are just conforming amendments. Happy to go into further detail or answer questions as the committee sees fit.
So thank you, Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just procedural question, Mr. Fuller. So we motioned to continue the conversation and I think maybe the first meeting. We did not motion for a bill draft. And so this is not to be considered as a potential for committee sponsorship. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, ultimately it's the committee's prerogative in terms of how to proceed. But you are correct. There was not a motion for a committee-sponsored bill draft. That's why the bill draft does not say joint travel on it, but was posted at the behest of that sponsor, of that individual member.
Follow up. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fuller, so that would not look like what we do regularly, right? Like, I mean, we bring a bill or we motion for a bill draft. LSO attorneys go through a bill draft. We look at that bill draft and then we determine if we want to sponsor and amend that. We don't bring bills with individual members' names on them and consider those for sponsorship. Is that accurate?
Mr. Fuller, go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, generally the process is as you described. Have other things happened where committees have sponsored bills in other ways? Yes.
So good questions, Representative. And it was really an opportunity, we thought, as co-chairman, to use that kind of as a springboard to learn from one of our other agencies, get up to speed educationally on how this process takes place. I have in the past on committees seen where a committee will make a motion to carry an individual bill at this stage, but that's not the purpose of today. And especially with the senator not being here, I think that this is more informational. There are a couple other bills that we may allude to later on in the day, just as information for the committee. You may see these during the upcoming session, but this is one of those. Does that, Mr. Co-Chairman, did I express that appropriately?
Yeah, thank you. And I do appreciate Representative Provenza's comments. And they're not lost on us. I do think that given the short time that was requested of us in terms of what we had for the interim and the subjects that we were trying to educate ourselves on, this is merely, I think this bill draft is just educational, and we're going to go into some testimony here in a moment to learn more. If any of you followed it during session, I think it only showed how complex the issue is, and watch that bill draft not make it through the kind of the first phase of voting. And I think that it was a decision that the co-chair and I made, and out of respect for the process and just educationally. And I think we are going to see a few more comments on individual bills if time allows, just that we may see during session to prep us and to give us a chance to talk about them. But I think the bill draft is simply there as a resource for this discussion that we're about to have. And beyond that, I don't think there's any intent, at least certainly of the co-chair and I to further that, given the lack of time we have and lack of additional meeting we have.
Go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, I just thank you both for your clarification on that. We saw in committee number 5 last week that there was an individual bill that was brought with potentially what seemed like trying to sponsor. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness on this process. So thank you.
Generally speaking, fellow members, I always try to be professionally respectful of individual committee members, and members who have sponsored bills that receive some votes for interim topic, for example, that's worth looking at and worth educating ourselves on. So that's really where this comes from. And the committee can make any motion they want to make, but then of course we would have to vote on those, and that's not the intention necessarily. So let's learn a little bit more about this. Director, I'm going to ask you guys to come forward. Really appreciate you being here. That hopefully that provides a decent enough springboard into an opportunity to learn about processes with regard to impacts and mitigation. And we have a lot of processes in place, don't we? I think you're on.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we're pleased to be here today to talk about the Industrial Siting Act and the implementation of the Industrial Siting Act as we do this through our Industrial Siting Division, which let me stop there. And I'm Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. With me is Jenny Staben. She's the Administrator of the Industrial Siting Division. So apologize for that. But anyway, so we're happy to be here to provide an overview of the Industrial Siting Act and how we go about implementing things. And then I think as we go through this, you'll be able to connect some of the dots in the draft bill that you all talked about. We're not going to go into specific details on that bill, but I think you'll see the connections as we go through it.
Well, Director, thank you. And Jenny, look forward to both of you and your comments. I think obviously the interest on behalf of the Travel and Wildlife Committee is more specific to the habitat and wildlife populations and impacts to our waterways or whatever. But take it away.
All right.
Look forward to it.
Okay, just to provide a little bit of background, the Industrial Siting Act has been around since 1975, but it's gone through a lot of changes over the years. Originally, it was a separate agency. It had 8 full-time employees. Today, it's a division within the DEQ, and that happened in 1992. It went from being its own agency, and then in 1992, it became incorporated as a separate division within the DEQ, one of the 7 divisions that we have. As far as the head count, right now we have 3 full-time employees in the Industrial Siting Division. And over the years, it's waffled between 1.5 FTE to 3, depending on how busy things are. Right now, we're at 3 because they've been extremely busy. Now, there's certain requirements for a proposed industrial project to become jurisdictional under the Industrial Siting Act. And those include an estimated construction cost of over $290.4 million. That's changed over time. Back in 1992, it was around $90 million, but we adjusted every year for inflation. And so that's where we're at today. For wind turbine projects or wind projects, it's 20 wind turbines or more makes you jurisdictional, regardless of cost. With solar, if you generate more than 30 megawatts or you disturb greater than 100 surface acres, you're jurisdictional. There are a few other, excuse me, there are a few other instances where somebody can be jurisdictional, but they're not really something that we see very often, so I'm not going to get into those. There are 2 purposes, excuse me.
It's all right.
There are 2 main purposes for the Industrial Siting Act. One, it provides a mechanism to assess and control the any adverse effects of a major industrial activity on environmental, social, or economic conditions within the area primarily affected by the project. And the second thing it does, it provides a mechanism to address the unmitigated impacts through impact assistance payments to the local communities. And that is not within the Industrial Siting Act. It is actually in the sales and use tax statutes. That explains how that all works in the distribution. So the source of the funding for impact assistance payments is actually the state's share of the sales and use tax. And then there's a scale within the statutes itself that depending on the size of the project, that scale actually drops down a little bit. So the state's share is 2.76% of the 4 cents. And so a portion of that, depending on the size of the project, would go for paying the impact assistance to the local communities. Now that's for unmitigated impacts, and unmitigated impacts is defined in the sales and use tax statutes. And that unmitigated impacts means expenses that are incurred by a county, city, or town directly or indirectly attributable to the construction of that industrial facility. And that they're not otherwise mitigated by any other entity like the applicant. But it further defines those unmitigated impacts that are eligible under the industrial siting process. And it's for medical services, fire and law enforcement services, roads, and public utilities. So that's the sideboards or the constraints on how those funds can be used. The unique thing about the industrial siting process is that in the statutes, it establishes closure on local and state government requirements after the permit is issued. So once the permit's issued, state agencies or local governments cannot add additional requirements to that project. There's an exception to that, and that's the Department of Environmental Quality and the Public Service Commission. So all the air quality permitting, water quality permitting, et cetera, would still apply, and industrial siting does not interfere with that. Same thing goes with the Public Service Commission. Now, there is an industrial siting council. It's a 7-member council. It's different than the Environmental Quality Council. The Environmental Quality Council specifically is for hearing issues related to air permits, water permits, et cetera. So if there's an appeal to a permit action, that's the Environmental Quality Council. The other thing they do is they promulgate rules for the agency. The Industrial Siting Council, it's 7 members appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. They serve 6-year terms. And then no more than 75% of the council can be from the same political party. Now, I'm going to read this part of the statute because I think it's relevant and has some connection and relates to what you may be talking about on this proposed bill. The administrative head of each state agency outlined in the statute or their designated representative may attend meetings of the council and serve in an advisory capacity to facilitate and expedite the decision-making process of the council. The council may request any administrative head to pursue, evaluate, and submit reports relative to any study which may be required in the evaluation of an application for a permit. So the short of that is the director of the Game and Fish or their designee can attend these industrial siting council hearings and their contested case hearings, but they can provide information as requested by the council so that they can make informed decisions. So like I said, there are the state government agencies that can participate in this process. There are 19 currently listed in the statute. And one of those is the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. Now, decisions of the Industrial Siting Council are a little different than our typical permits that we issue. Under the Environmental Quality Act, the director issues permits. With the industrial siting, it's the council that actually issues the permit. So if there's an appeal to the decision by the council, it doesn't go to the Environmental Quality Council, it goes to district court. Now, the council will grant permits either as proposed or as modified by the council if they find that it meets the requirements of the act. So they have to comply with all applicable law. The facility will not pose a threat of serious injury to the environment nor to social or economic conditions or inhabitants. And then the facility will not substantially impair the health, safety, or welfare of the inhabitants. And then there's a requirement that they also have to demonstrate they have the financial resources to decommission and reclaim the facility at the end of its useful life. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over to the administrator to talk about how things are implemented. So the practical parts of everything that's in the act and in the rules of the council.
Committee members, I'm Jenny Staben, the Administrator of Industrial Siting. And my portion of the discussion today is to talk about the different opportunities that Game and Fish currently has to engage in the industrial siting process. Now, what I'm about to describe is the same process that applies for all 19 state agencies that are required by statute to engage with permit applicants and have input on applications, as well as recommendations for permit conditions. So the first step in a permit application, typically an industrial siting permit application, just to give you an idea, is anywhere between about 1,200 and 2,500 pages. So these applications themselves take a significant amount of time to develop. By statute, an applicant within that application must evaluate the potential environmental impacts and provide plans and proposals to alleviate such impacts. Specifically, they must do studies and provide plans and proposals to alleviate impacts on terrestrial and aquatic wildlife, as well as those on threatened, endangered, and rare species and other species of concern identified in the State Wildlife Action Plan as prepared by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. Although this statute is not a specific, which you would say, direct requirement for an applicant to engage with Game and Fish prior to submitting their permit application, the implication of it is an applicant is not able to complete their industrial siting application unless they engage in early engagement with Game and Fish to determine the studies that they need to do and to create plans and proposals to alleviate potential impacts that the facility would have on terrestrial and aquatic wildlife, threatened and endangered species, and rare species. So you have the opportunity first at the pre-application period. Then, once an application is complete, it is submitted to the Industrial Siting Division. The division is charged by statute to notify Game and Fish and the other 19 state agencies for their input and review on that specific application. By statute, Game and Fish, as well as the other agencies, must provide to the Industrial Siting Division information and recommendations relative to the impacts of the proposed facility as it applies to, in this case, Game and Fish's area of expertise. Also by statute, the agencies, as well as Game and Fish, must provide that information, recommendation, and any requests for permit conditions within 60 days of receiving what is called the notification of the application. Essentially, it is a notification the division sends out that says, here's the final application. We do need your input for information, recommendation, and requested permit conditions. And by statute, the information provided by Game and Fish must include an opinion as to the advisability of granting or denying the permit, together with reasons therefor, and recommendations regarding appropriate conditions to include on the permit, but only as to the areas within its expertise. The idea being that Game and Fish, as well as the other 19 state agencies within their area of expertise, need to provide the opinion on whether to grant or deny a permit, as well as information, recommendations, and permit conditions. How this statute is implemented by the division is that within 60 days of notice to Game and Fish, we receive a recommendation letter from them. That letter itself will include information, recommendations, permit conditions. I apologize for repeating myself. What the division does then is we take that recommendation from Game and Fish and we compare it to the information in an application. An industrial siting permit application contains a number of commitments and promises of what the permittee will do to alleviate impacts to the environment. Now, if Game and Fish's recommendations and request for permit conditions align with that already that the applicant has committed in its application, then we forward all the information to the council, but we may not forward a specific permit condition if the applicant has already committed to that plan or proposal or a way to alleviate the impact to wildlife. If the information in the application does not align with Game and Fish's recommendations or requested permit conditions, then we forward those permit conditions to the council to consider to put on the permit. The idea is that every commitment and plan for a study, any promise in the industrial siting permit application automatically becomes a requirement of the permit. The only difference in that is if there is a specific issue debated and otherwise determined by the council at council meetings. Typically, but typically the process is we take all the promises and commitments in application, we review what is requested or recommended by Game and Fish. If where that does not align is turned into permit conditions submitted to the council for their consideration to put on the permit. Throughout this entire period, if let's say Game and Fish has requested permit conditions, and if the applicant were to not agree to those permit conditions, what happens then is the division recommends to the applicant to go back to Game and Fish and see if there's an independent agreement that can be made with Game and Fish outside of the industrial siting process. If Game and Fish can then come to an agreement of which they are comfortable with, they may withdraw their request for permit conditions. If not, those permit conditions are carried forward to the council, and at the actual council hearing, Game and Fish is invited to come and attend and stand for questions if needed. Once a permit condition is granted on the permit, that permit and its conditions, plus all of its commitments made within the application, last for the full life of the project through reclamation and decommissioning. As Director Parvit had mentioned, a permit application, in order for it to be granted by the council, it must be found that it has no significant there's no significant risk of an adverse impact on the environment. Now, that finding does need to be maintained through the life of the project. Should Game and Fish or any other agency find that there is an adverse impact on the project that was not contemplated through the application process, they can bring that forward. What they would do is they'd notify the division. We would then bring that forward at the next scheduled quarterly meeting to the council for the council to review. The council may review and adjust the permit at that time, or they may set the issue for a hearing. As these permits are amended through the life of the permits, it is a very similar process. Any of the 19 state agencies, including Game and Fish, can give their input on that amendment process, and it's very similar. They would give their concerns. They would be taken forward to the council at a quarterly meeting. The council then could decide that issue at the meeting or set it for a hearing. The idea overall is that through the entire life of a project, Game and Fish, as well as any other agency, is free to notify the council of adverse impacts. But something to also keep in mind throughout this entire process is all 19 state agencies have their own individual authority and power. Game and Fish, as well as every other state agency, are free to engage in any type of agreement, negotiation, projects, whatever they see fit and would like to work out with the applicant and then later with a permittee outside of the industrial siting process. So as a project is being planned before application, Game and Fish is free to make any type of agreement outside of the industrial siting process, plus provide their information and requested permit conditions within the industrial siting process. This is the same through the life of the project. If a agency finds an adverse impact, they can choose to bring that to the council to address, or they can choose to address that themselves within their own agency. And with that,
Let's stop
I
there
will
for just a
close.
minute.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was like,
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that is a lot, both of you. And by the way, committee, this is not the home committee of our Department of Environmental Quality or the industrial siting. They belong to another committee. And so it's out of the goodness of their hearts that they came today to visit with us about this process. And you, I'm sure, would admit that that sounds very bureaucratic. And we get questions from our constituents. You know, when these industrial projects are set down out there, say on Shirley Basin somewhere, what does that do to our antelope herd?
Mhm.
And maybe it never comes back. And so it's important for us to know what that process is so that we can help people understand. And I get it. Sometimes they're very concerned about the Game and Fish piece because it's just one of 19 agencies that has to get in the door to say this might be a concern. So committee, any questions, thoughts, directives to on the conversation? Go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for that information. It's overwhelming. Good Lord, I just don't know how you do that. But anyway, after maybe taking a look at this working draft, if this does go forward, maybe as an individual bill, do you feel like this is something that we need with everything that you've already got in place to deal with projects?
Director, yeah. Take it away.
All right. Mr. Chairman, Senator, I think it provides some clarity for the Game and Fish as to what they are allowed to do within the process. And I always think about the Jonah Field. And when you look at the BLM record of decision, it created a board made up of the Game and Fish, the Department of Agriculture, the DEQ, BLM, and the county commissioners. And then there were funds made available to address impacts to wildlife, as an example. And this is a process that we have for state projects that allow us to mitigate these impacts and take those into consideration. So I've read through this, and I think it clarifies where the impact assistance comes from. It doesn't come from the state as normal impact assistance that comes for local communities. It would come from the applicant with an agreement with the Game and Fish. So I think it helps provide that clarity.
Thank you.
Follow up? No. Okay. Anything else, committee? So I'm going to be interested in other testimony today. I think there are concerns that something like this might get in the way of a process that already seems to work. From our standpoint, as we look at what we can do for a specific department within our purview, is what does this do for the Game and Fish? So can you tell me a little bit more about these side deals? are you always aware of what goes on the side over there? And does that stand to directly benefit the Game and Fish, for example? Let's just say a company wants to locate something and they say, I'll tell you what, we'll meet over here and take care of some things on the side. Does that take place? I mean, how does that work?
Mr. Chairman, there are conversations that occur with the project applicant and the Game and Fish, and actually we encourage that to happen early in the process before they submit their application, so that the Game and Fish and the applicant can determine how that would be incorporated either into the application or into a condition for the permit. It doesn't have to necessarily be a payment to an entity. It can be, this is an area where we're concerned about migration corridors or whatever. And it gives the opportunity for the applicant to understand that and then make some adjustments to their project or the construction schedule to address those concerns. And the thing that is pointed out in this draft bill talks about impacts from the project. So payments to the Game and Fish so they can address something that is a result of the industrial project. It's not to mitigate something that's occurring somewhere else in the state.
You have worked on this issue up to this point. Again, this will probably, or perhaps might end up in the session as an individual bill. I don't know. Senator's not here today, but I'm sure you've had an opportunity to take a look at this, have you not? And worked with the sponsor?
So, Mr. Chairman, I personally have not worked with the sponsor on this, but we have read the bill. I think it's something that fits within the context of the way the process works now.
Okay.
But as I said, I think it helps to clarify a few things as to how that process works for the Game and Fish.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Is there anything, committee? I'm inclined to take a little bit more. Go ahead, Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question I have, and you kind of hit on it, I mean, do you feel like the process is already working, or is this warranted? Because it seems like to me, I haven't really heard of a lot of problems. I know the Game and Fish has always been more than willing to meet with people and try to come up with an idea that can mitigate this stuff. But I've never had an opportunity to ask you folks. I mean, I appreciate both of you being here, and I would like to hear your opinion if you think this is warranted, or is this formalizing something that has, I mean, Wyoming used to be, a handshake was good enough. And this to me appears to be formalizing something that I don't know. I'd like to hear if you guys feel that that is warranted at this time. Thank you.
Director, do you want that one, or Ms. Staben? Either one.
I'll start and then
Yeah.
let
All right.
the administrator clean up. So, Mr. Chairman.
That's kind of what you guys do anyway, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
So to speak.
Yeah. So, bump. There you go.
Mr. Chairman, and Representative, I think the existing process has worked well over the years. It's been in place since about 1975. I think some of the differences that we're seeing today compared to previous years or early years, we used to get we would average one permit a year. And now we're averaging 6 or 8, and they're quite varied. And so you're seeing a lot of wind projects, a lot of solar projects that take up a large area. And so the concern, I think, is legitimate. But to a specific question, Is the current process sufficient? I think everything that is in the bill, the way I read it, is captured currently in the process. But this provides a little bit more clarity for the Game and Fish and for the project proponent on how they can go about resolving those issues.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anything else, committee? I'm inclined to take any other public comment today. So really appreciate you guys coming in front of the committee and helping us to get up to speed. We reserve the right to fire another question at you if you can stay put for a little bit here. But I do want to give opportunity to anyone else, including the department, if they'd like to come up and have any comments on this. So,
Sure.
Director, Ms. Statement, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Okay, let's start with the department and then obviously anyone else who would like to jump in on this. And this is more informational and educational than it is anything else today. So Director, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say a few things and then maybe stand for questions, because we did talk about this quite a bit at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago. Our role is really that technical assistance. It's the proponent's responsibility to mitigate for any fish or wildlife resource impacts. And so we just sort of stand to help. We do that under a hierarchy of mitigation. So first, we're trying to avoid impacts altogether. We love it, just like the director said, when they point the people to us early. So we can steer them away out of those critical areas. But we do know that some resources in the state happen only in a specific area. Rare earth minerals, you're not going to move them. They are where they are. So we really work then on minimizing the impact, working right with the engineers and the experts on the project to say, can we design it this way instead? Because that's going to have less of an impact. It's quite interesting process. It's biologists working with engineers. So it's a lot of give and take and therefore lots of hours. We find ourselves experts in all sorts of development because of that. And then at the end, if we cannot minimize to a degree that we're happy with, that's where the mitigation piece comes in. And so there's different mitigation that you can do right on site or near site within the same area that the species you're concerned about is living. So we work through that with proponents. We do put, I would say, everything in writing, but not quite everything. We have a lot of developers who come to us confidentially early on in their project and make a lot of big picture decisions before we start our formal process. But along the way, we provide everything in written letters to the council formally about that work that we're doing with proponents, about our concerns, and we lay that out. Can we, I think one of your questions, do we do this now? Can we do this now? Absolutely. We can work with companies and companies will say, you know, we really are concerned about this. What else can we do? So we will give them advice and talk through that with them now. And then anything that we do come upon an agreement, again, we'll put it in that formal letter to the council.
So Director, I guess the question from me is a lot of that mitigation goes elsewhere. Through funding processes to local governments and whatever, and that's worked very well for the most part, I think. I've heard that the impact to your agency is now up to maybe 8 or 9 times what it once was. So has that concerned you lately? I mean, there's a lot of projects being proposed out there, and it seems like there's quite a bit of impact to your department.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. We have a 6-person team who works on this throughout the state. It kind of ebbs and flows. There's a lot. So they work on all sorts of development from oil and gas to mining to solar to wind. I'll tell you that the wind and solar was really heavy, you know, just over a year ago when there were the tax incentives. We had, you know, numerous projects, 15 to 20 that we were looking at one time. So it kind of comes and goes depending on, but increasing workload, at least steady. You could say that, you know, during COVID, when things got quiet, it really calmed down. But since COVID, it is picking up, and we do have a continuous need for additional capacity. So yeah, additional strain on the department that way.
Okay, thank you. Anything for, go ahead, Representative Warp.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the same question then. Do you feel like this process is working or do you think we need a more formal declaration to direct the department?
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Director.
Representative, I do feel that it's working. We work very closely with the administrator, Jenny Shaban, who just talked, and I think we have found a way to make it work well. Clarity can always help. You know, we talk right with proponents, developers all the time. I kind of relate this a little bit if you guys remember the sage grouse bill that went through last year. That was on sage grouse mitigation, and that bill in state statute already allowed for operator offered mitigation measures. So where an oil and gas operator could locally mitigate the issue, it was sort of already there, but what the bill did is it sort of put attention on it or exaggerated to clarify it. And maybe that's what this does, but we can already do it now.
Okay, follow up, go ahead.
Just
and
to
then we'll
follow
go
up,
to
I wondered,
Representative.
Director, in a prior life, I was a wildlife biologist and had the opportunity to work with some of this stuff. Does the department have like a seed mix that they can provide? Because that's the one thing that I learned in my early days as a biologist is that there's always an impact, but it's how we treat that impact. It can either be a positive or a negative. And I know that was one thing that people always came to us and said, what type of seed mix would you recommend? And I assume that you provide that. If somebody's having an impact, you say, this is the type of seed that we would recommend you put back on that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yeah, absolutely. Specific seed mixes are part of that. If there's any sort of replanting, erosion control, we work that. We're very concerned when we get anywhere near our streams about that erosion factor. So we're looking at all aspects, and that would fall into how do we minimize the impacts, right? So we know there's going to be impacts, but how do we reseed, prevent erosion so we have the least amount of impacts?
Representative Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Director, for just a little more clarification, do you feel like you're working well with the applicants through Game and Fish?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, absolutely. You know, I get comments from the different applicants all the time, proponents. You know, one of them, I got a compliment once that said, you know, California might seem like they have strict, you know, regulations, but you guys really do. But the difference is there they never talk to a person. And us, they talk to us face to face from day one. We really encourage that and want that. And we have a lot that we know very well. Where we might have some hurdles now and then would be where we have new developers coming from out of state. And we just break them in. But that's sometimes where we have hiccups in the wind industry and the solar industry. We see that a lot because what we see is a lot of these developers coming in from out of state, but they're almost like house flippers. They do one piece of the process. So they do the permitting and then they sell it. And then someone does the construction and then they sell it. And then those who are managing it is a different company. That's when our job gets hard because we're just constantly revisiting with them and talking about what obligations they made. So it isn't, you know, it isn't without its struggles, but overall we work very well with them. And part of that's just like Director Parfit said is pointing them to us early and starting that relationship and getting in the door right when they're thinking about a project and not, you know, when they're at the development phase. So.
Representative Conley, and then we'll come this way to the senator. Oh, follow up, Representative Thayer, my apologies. Then to Representative Conley, then to Senator Jones, and we'll keep going.
Director, so in circling it all together, you're feeling like the process is working that we currently have?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, I'm more than satisfied with the current process.
Thank you for that. Good question. Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The statement was made that through the life of the project, there can be additional mitigation requests. Do you see that fairly often?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, fairly often that's a little bit hard to say. I would say that one of the things we often require as we get more and more knowledge about these different types of energy on our landscape, such as wind or solar, that are newer to the state, we are doing different research projects to better understand that impact, but we're also requiring the proponents to do some monitoring because we may think this impact will happen, but we're not sure. So we have them do that for a lot of times for 3 consecutive years to revisit it and to look at that. And then we might tweak things or we might ask for additional data. We had a wind company that was killing a lot of bats, way more out of the norm. We know that the wind turbines do have an effect on individual birds and bats, but in this case, it was quite substantial. So we went to them and we said, so you can do these mitigation techniques. So you are actually minimizing where you curtail and stop the blades during critical times a year. Or we think something's wrong with your monitoring data. Go back and do some more monitoring for a few more years. They challenged us a bit, but they chose to go back and monitor for a few more years. And their new data showed that their line of impact was consistent to what we see across the West. So we're not seeing, there is some, but we're kind of learning as we go as well.
Okay, Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Bruce, I know we've talked about this before about the solar panel issue in my part of the state, but and I know that I believe the issue was that it's on federal ground. Are you allowed to weigh in on that? Or since that happened, has anything changed that would prevent that from happening now?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator. A very, very historical sort of development in the state, right? The first solar project that went to development. And we were worried when it did, and we commented. We tried to influence BLM. That was before Industrial Siting Council had the ability to permit solar. So before they had that process for solar, like they talked about today. And so we were limited to what we could convince the BLM. We had concerns. We knew that things would happen that happened, which was a barrier to the antelope movement in the area. But we did get the BLM to agree that the company needed to pay for a study to see if we were right with what we anticipated would happen. So we did gain something from that. We gained a published research that talked about the impacts of what solar can have, especially on antelope particularly. And then when it did happen, we went back to BLM and said, we believe we can modify these fences to minimize the impact. We knew it's still there, but to make it a little bit better. So we've been working very closely with the company that continues to change hands quite a bit and the BLM to get that in place. If we had that same situation today under the authorities of the Industrial Siting Council, I believe we could have went about that a whole lot different.
Committee, unfortunately, we are constrained by an agenda, so we're going to keep moving. Director Bruce, thank you. Really appreciate it. I do want to offer, obviously, any further public comment. If anyone wants to come forward and testify on this, please feel free to do that. I would just ask that you clip right along for us to keep us on track. Again, this is just an educational piece primarily today. So, good morning. Welcome to both of you.
Absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Chris Brown representing Powering Up Wyoming. Appreciate a few minutes, and I will be brief. Mr. Chairman, I absolutely acknowledge the fine line that the legislature walks between preserving our world-class wildlife and inviting industrial investment into the state, trying to grow our economy. It would be our perspective, Mr. Chairman, that it's been clearly illustrated that the siting process that we have in place right now is working. When I speak with developers, when they are referencing the siting process, they say it is arduous. We've heard this morning that it is between 1,200 and 2,500 pages long, 19 state agencies weighing in, but that it's fair and predictable. What industry is looking for is predictability when coming to invest in the state. And it's our position, Mr. Chairman, that the bill draft that you're considering, or that is being discussed today in an informational manner, would potentially add an additional layer of uncertainty in an already lengthy process. I think one of the key aspects that was brought up this morning was that conditions outlined in the permit need to be maintained through the life of the project, and that they have the ability to review and have an additional hearing through the life of the project if conditions warrant. Mr. Chairman, I promised I'd be brief, but I want to reference a project that didn't happen here in this county recently. You may have read an op-ed that was written by Matt Wilson, Radiant Senior Director of Operations, and the title of the article was "Why We Chose Tennessee Over Wyoming." I'm not going to read that, Mr. Chairman, but I'm just going to cite one sentence, and that was, "At the end of the day, our decision came down to regulatory certainty." And so as we hear this morning about a process that is working and that is reviewed throughout the life of a project, we would ask you to consider regulatory certainty as well as this discussion continues. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Ms. Levin, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
I
Members of the
apologize.
committee.
Let me back up. Committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Brown? I'm sorry. I get the spur on the horse, and we're headed out. Any questions? Thank you. Sorry, committee. Now, Ms. Levin, thanks.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here on behalf of the Trona industry. Let me echo the comments of my colleague and much of what you've already heard from the agencies this morning. The Trona industry does have to go through the industrial siting process on their projects. These are enormous projects, very expensive projects. They have a good working relationship with both the DEQ and the Game and Fish. As you heard this morning, this is not an easy process to navigate. It is a lengthy process. It is also an expensive process. Putting together those studies to show what you're going to do to try to mitigate impacts takes time, and it takes an enormous amount of financial resource. The issue of concern, to just cut to the chase for the Trona industry, this bill goes beyond clarifying a process. It requires an additional payment from the applicant. That's a big concern to the industry when you're already a very expensive project. You've already expended enormous resources to put your application together. And now there's contemplated an additional payment on behalf of the applicant. What stops those other agencies from all of a sudden coming forward and saying, well, if Game and Fish can ask for an additional payment, we'd like to ask for an additional payment too. At some point, these industrial projects have a breaking point. And so we would encourage you to leave the process alone because it is working. It is a balance. Of course, it's a balance. Projects have been asked to move. And in the case of the Trona industry, there isn't a whole lot of maneuvering that you can do. Those deposits are where they are. And, they're pretty special, but so are the other resources in that area. And the industry takes that seriously. So seriously to the extent that in the case of the Sweetwater Solar project that was pre-industrial siting, it was the Trona industry that brought the bill forward to ask the legislature to put that under industrial siting because their comments were also ignored in that process. And there were additional projects that were starting to eye that area. And so the Trona industry came forward and said, please put these projects under industrial siting. So we do feel like the process works, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Levin, I think I was chairman of that committee and we worked together back then. And
do where, Mr.
now we
Chairman.
bump into each other again. Any questions for Ms. Levin and the Trona industry? Thank you both for being here. Is there anyone else who wants to testify on this? And we'll keep clipping through. Good morning, both of you. Who wants to take it first?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name's Monica Leininger, speaking on behalf of the Nature Conservancy in Wyoming. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. Thanks for your work on this important topic. My client supports the core purpose of this bill, which is mitigating impact to critical wildlife habitat from large-scale development. That being said, there's obviously problems with the bill, and I don't think it got enough time this session to be ready for prime time, as y'all like to say. I think the biggest problem with the bill is really outlined throughout section 1, and that's in regards to the application process from eligible agencies. In Wyoming, we're a business-friendly state, and we need to provide developers with upfront cost certainty, and I don't think the process outlined in the bill currently offers that. I would prefer to see a tiered system to where the legislature gives Game and Fish rulemaking authority to assess a fee based off the level of impact, based off whether the project is in critical wildlife habitat. I think something like that would work better, and it would provide industry with more certainty upfront of what those costs would be. That's something we already do, in Sage Grouse Corps, for instance. And so we have a system and a template to work off of there. But I wanted to clearly explain the problem from my client's perspective here that we're talking about. I think we can all agree that Wyoming's industrial siting system works well, but it doesn't address what we call macro siting. So here's an example of how I see this problem playing out. So a solar company wants to build a solar project, and they work with a landowner to secure leases for that land. By then, usually the developers go to Game and Fish, if they're operating in good confidence in the state and working well with our agencies. They can't come to Game and Fish before they have a site selected, right? Because what would they talk about? Like, I want to build a project somewhere. Well, okay. So by that point, that developers are talking to Game and Fish, they've already invested a lot of money and a lot of time into that site. And it's mostly fixed, right? Depending on the type of project, if it's rare earth minerals, it's pretty fixed. With solar, it would be pretty hard to tell a developer, hey, can you just move that project 4 miles that way? So even if the project is in, a migration corridor or critical winter range, it may be cited poorly from a wildlife standpoint, that our agencies just do the best that they can to do what I call micro-siting, right? And do things like put in fencing changes or wildlife corridors that could make that project better from a wildlife standpoint. So what my organization would really like to see is a system that incentivizes developers to go to the lower conflict areas and disincentivizes them from going to conflict zones. I think we could follow a similar process that we do with sage grouse, where it's sort of a pay-to-play situation, to where if you want to site in critical habitat for wildlife, sure, you can do that, but you should pay for those unmitigated impacts, which is what I believe Senator Hicks is getting to in his bill here. While this may not be a major issue right now, of course, we've seen bad projects, but a lot of the projects we've seen since, the one in Senator Jones's area have been relatively good. It's going to get harder and harder down the road. And that's just because a lot of those low conflict places are already either under lease or under speculation. So all I'm saying is I hope that this committee can continue this conversation and really think about the long-term outlook of the problem and how to mitigate damages to the state's natural resources. So thank you for the opportunity. Happy to take questions.
Schleininger, thank you very much. Very well stated. Anything for the Nature Conservancy? All righty, let's keep moving along.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnson, welcome back.
You again. Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And I will keep this extremely brief because we work very closely with our partners at the Nature Conservancy on topics like this. The hunting voice has been consistent in being concerning about how we do this and how we do it well, because we have never been against development. We're for smart development. And this falls directly into this. And I think, again, to reiterate my colleague's point here, thank you for having this discussion. And let's keep having it, because this nuance is really, really important to get right. I think looking at how we sort of incentivize avoidance when it's needed, but also how we build in the places that make sense. That way, both industry and wildlife benefit from it. I think the upfront understanding of where impacts can be, she's right in talking about the low-hanging fruit having been snapped up. Siting is going to get harder and harder and harder. as, you know, whether it's renewables or whether it's subdivisions or anything else, those are the things that are impacting wildlife in a mega way, in a way that is long lasting. So we have to look and be smart about it. But I don't think that we, what would I say? Renewables is important to the state's future, and so is wildlife, and we can have both. And if we do it smartly, and I think a lot of the structure that Monica laid out in her testimony about whether it's a tiered fee structure or something that addresses it upfront, that gives upfront costs, that people understand what's coming before they invest a bunch of time and money into it. That's how we get at the table together and get things done the Wyoming way. It's we're upfront with each other. We're honest about where it's hard, and when it is hard, we work together to make it better.
Committee, anything for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation? These two have me ready to go fight the fight, I'm telling you. Well done. No, thank you both. Really appreciate it. Any further public comment on this issue? Seeing none, do anyone online? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Jeff Pope online.
Okay, Mr. Pope. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you again for having me. My name's Jeff Pope. I'm a lawyer with Holland and Hart. I'm here today on behalf of Enbridge, who is developing several projects in the state. They've asked me to come speak on this topic, and I'll address some of the concepts of the bill, but again, keep it high level. They've asked me to come and speak because I've served as lead counsel on their projects that have gone through the industrial siting process. I've also served as lead counsel on a number of other wind, solar, mining, oil and gas, transmission, and what will soon be nuclear projects that go through this process. So suffice it to say, I've, over the last decade, been pretty well versed. And Director Parfit and Administrator Stabin covered the large amounts of protections that exist in the process for wildlife. So I want to touch on three other things that I don't think the committee has heard yet on this topic. The first is the breadth of what you're considering. Industrial siting tends to be the stand-in for when we talk about renewable projects, because renewable projects, at least over the last 5 years, have been the most prevalent ones to go through that process. But the way facility is defined in the Industrial Siting Act, we are talking about renewable projects, mining projects, oil and gas processing facilities, potentially data centers, other electrical generation projects, transmission, nuclear projects, and even something like if Ford wanted to come and build a car manufacturing facility in Wyoming, they would all be subject to this permitting process. So the breadth of the process is very important to consider in terms of how we balance the need to protect wildlife with the need to ensure development. So on that front, I want to make 2 points. The first is that, and you've already heard this from a couple of other folks, Wyoming's process is the most arduous in the country when it comes from a permitting perspective. I not only permit projects in Wyoming, but I also help permit projects in other states. And I've had the opportunity to serve on nationwide panels that talk about what are the siting requirements across the country. I can tell you from that work that Wyoming is way out ahead in terms of both the amount of regulation, the amount of process that goes through. An easy comparison is our neighbor to the south. The state of Colorado has given all siting authority to the counties, but it doesn't require the counties to actually implement any siting regulations. So I've permitted projects in Colorado where there are no permits to get, there are no regulations to deal with. And so from a developer perspective, what I hear from my clients most often is, although Wyoming has incredible resources, Wyoming is very difficult to develop in. And so the bill draft that was originally floated last session and the bill draft that is kind of served as the basis point for this discussion pose a risk to Wyoming's competitive environment when it comes to these projects, because, as been noted by a couple of other prior speakers, that adds costs. We already have a roughly 2 to 3 year long process. You've heard about the volume of work that goes into it. I can give you some numbers to try and help put that into context. The average industrial siting application in Wyoming costs an applicant in the range of $3 to $4 million. Now, I'd love to say that's all my fees, but I represent a very small portion of that overall cost. And that is just the cost to do the studies, prepare the application. It is not the cost of any mitigation measures, any payments that an applicant would choose to make on its own or as part of some kind of a permit condition. So it's a long time frame. It's very costly. And now kind of the original bill draft and this would add further costs. As Mr. Brown noted, there's also the uncertainty of what would that cost be? That's not known from this bill. It wasn't known from the last bill. And you do have developers that are making choices to come to Wyoming or not to come to Wyoming based on whether they can actually see an end goal for the project. And the last thing on cost I want to talk about is a bit of a misconception about what developers face. A lot of these projects are huge investments. Some are billions of dollars. And that leads people to think that there's lots of money for these projects to throw around. But the operating margins and the profit margins for most of these projects is in the single digits at the end of the day. And so a few million here, a few million there actually can tip the scale of the viability of the project. And I've worked on a couple that did not come to the state of Wyoming because of the increased costs they faced here. Last point I want to make is more of a process point because, again, I think the protection piece of what's in place in our current law has been covered. But the way this bill and the way really any bill that would get the unmitigated wildlife impact issue before the Industrial Siting Council really has the potential to create some problems for the applicant, the agency itself. And so what I mean by that is when we go into a hearing before the Industrial Siting Council, we are presenting an application that 99% of the time represents that there are no unmitigated impacts, that either through the siting process or through mitigation plans and measures which are required by law, there has been something done to alleviate any impacts to wildlife. The bill that you have before you, the prior bill, and really kind of the thought process behind this whole concept would require one of these agencies coming in to say, you know what, the applicant is wrong. There are unmitigated impacts. As the attorney for the applicant, I'm going to have to prepare in that hearing to go after whoever is requesting those funds, to not because we don't want to mitigate wildlife impacts, but because someone coming in and saying, actually, there are unmitigated impacts to this project could lead the Industrial Siting Council to conclude that it is not in the beneficial interests of the environment to approve that permit application. So that
Mr. Pope, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. We do have an agenda and you're doing great, but we've just got to keep moving. So
I can be long-winded. I understand, Mr. Chairman.
That's all right.
I will
It's a great
simply
opening argument, I'll tell you that.
Thank you. I'll simply conclude with that no one wants to put anyone in the position of the applicant versus an agency, but that's really what the genesis of this does. And it's going to lead to some ugly confrontations that I don't think we need given the existing protections and wouldn't be beneficial for the agency or for the project. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pope. I'm sorry to hurry along. Really appreciate you being here and your comments. Anything, committee, for Mr. Pope? Well stated. Appreciate you. Thank you. That's going to wrap up public comment on this issue, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Your name and my name were on that bill in this last session, and certainly don't want to speak for the good senator who's not in the room right now, busy at another meeting, but I've had more phone calls from lobbyists and firms about this topic, and especially coming into this meeting when, as posted, it didn't necessarily have a bill draft to move, but we had one to work off of. And I think it just, all the comments we've heard, I think it really emphasizes an issue that needs to have further discussion. And I don't think here and now is the time, and certainly don't think heading into the budget session, but we're of course going to hear from industry that they're doing enough. But my job as someone that serves on TRW is to what value for our wildlife. That's what's important to me. Of course, they're going to say they have small margins and that there's uncertainty. It's expected, right? But I think the bringer of the bill originally, it was a simple conversation. Are we doing enough for wildlife? So with that, I think that we should continue the conversation. I appreciate hearing from lawyers and lobbyists from industry and really respect that we have to have some really clear paths for these industries because we need them to come to Wyoming, and we have been battling that, as Mr. Brown said, which is really challenging. And we want them here, but I also I hunted a lot around the Pinedale area, which you're very familiar with, and there's no secret that some of our ungulates down there weren't impacted by these. And it's just a simple question: are we doing enough? If the answer is yes, then we move on. If the answer is no, I think we need to talk about it as we head out of session in February and into the next interim. And with that, I do quickly. And this is probably not the best time because I think my colleagues could have some opinions, but I want to recognize Representative Riggins, who snuck in earlier, a colleague of ours, and welcome to the best committee in the body. Yeah, I'm not, just my opinion.
Well, Mr. Co-Chairman, well stated. I think the committee fully understands, why this topic was there. It's kind of a nice wrap-up piece for all the education that we provided to ourselves throughout the interim. This is an ongoing deal. Our habitat, our wildlife populations, our way of life, a lot of impacts and a lot of stresses out there. And a lot of stresses on our economic environment. We need to grow our state and we need to provide jobs and opportunities if we want our young people to stay here. A week ago, we took up lots of issues related to our school districts, and guess what? Only 4 districts out of 48 have grown in the last 5 years. The rest of them have been reduced in population. So lots of issues, and they all tie together. So really appreciate everyone who provided testimony on this. Committee, I don't want to ever prohibit any motions or any desires of the committee, but I, for one, am inclined to move on from the topic. If this arrives as an individual bill, we will welcome the discussion. But I don't want to push the committee. Is there anything else on this topic? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, my horse is all lathered up and he's ready to hand this off to you. So take it away.
It's kind of you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. With that, we are handed it off to me right on time, 11:30. We are going to move on to the Wyoming Arts Alliance update. They're in the room. Can they please come on forward? This discussion, for everyone's information, it's been ongoing for a long time with Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, but we had a great event last meeting we had and had the opportunity to have a chat one evening and realized that we need to get an update from you great folks. So really excited to have you here and looking forward to the update. Please introduce yourselves for the committee, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, thank you to the co-chairs and to the members of the committee for giving us time. We understand in a shortened session that it's difficult to make time for all the topics of interest, so we're grateful to be here today. My name is Ryan O'Neill, and I am actually now a member of the Wyoming Arts Alliance board, no longer serving as the interim director. And I've brought along some guests with me today to give you the full scope of the things that we have been working on. I'll let them introduce themselves, but wanted to remind you all before I do that the Wyoming Arts Alliance is the statewide nonprofit, nonpartisan group that does advocacy for the arts and really focuses on fostering an environment within Wyoming that is something that we are growing and sustaining our arts and culture sector. So we do that in a lot of different ways, but we're here to share a little bit of the work that we have been doing and highlight what steps are next for us. So I'll pass to my left and let our friends introduce themselves.
Mr. Chairman, did she just say nonpartisan? What does that mean? I'm kidding.
Breath of fresh air on this Thursday.
Yeah, there you go.
Good morning. My name is Lindsay Grant. I am the chair of the Wyoming Arts Alliance, as well as the executive director for the Lyric here in Casper. And the Lyric is a capital campaign that we're doing to build a performing arts here just right down the street. It's a over $25 million project. So just excited to share any of that around economic impact as well.
Maybe just tap the actual mic to see if it's on there. Yeah, there you go. We're working behind the scenes, technical difficulties.
My name's Jason Shogren. I'm the Strzok Professor at the University of Wyoming. I'm also a board member of the Wyoming Arts Council. I'm also an artist, and I spend my time doing economics and getting in the middle of all these discussions. And generally, if I'm doing my job, both sides of the argument have a bone to pick with me because I'm trying to find some way to have win-win.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here to give you just a brief state of the creative economy in Wyoming. This past year, I've been the presidential fellow of the creative economy at UW. The president, Seidel, pointed me to do this, and I've been working with the Arts Alliance and the Center for Business and Economic Analysis to get a report on how big is the creative economy in Wyoming, because it's something we all know and something we all take for granted because we see art and we think about art, but we don't think about it the same way we think about other industries because we think of the art world. And as an economist, I think of it as the art industry, and it's more than just food for the soul. It is food on the table. And so there's 3 takeaways from this report that we ran last fall. And the first one is that the impact on state GDP is much bigger than I thought. We're talking about $3.8 billion that the arts community is bringing into the state, which is about 1.4 billion in value added. So bringing in more value than the costs. Now, these numbers, you shouldn't think of them as absolute numbers. These are still generated by a model, so it gives you a relative feel on the size. That puts us at about 4% of the state GDP, which is bigger than I thought because we think about art and we think about artists and we think of all these little entrepreneurs running around, but we don't always think about the people who support the people who are the artists and then the people who support them. So the indirect effects, if you take the artists, the people who are supporting the artists, and those people who are supporting the people who support the artists, we're talking about 14,000 plus jobs that are associated with the arts creative economy. And we're talking about 35 million plus or minus some amount in terms of state and local tax revenue that comes in from the arts. So it has an impact. It's a little bit smaller than tourism. It's a little bit bigger than some industries that we typically think of when we're thinking of Wyoming. Of course, it doesn't compete with energy and it doesn't compete with minerals, but it competes with everybody else. It's right at the bottom of the top 10. So it's just outside of it. We'll call it 11, all right, in terms of its impact. But in my mind, that was way bigger than I thought. The second point is the return on investment is bigger than I thought, except it's very hard to measure because we're talking about creative capital. How do we measure the value of a vibrant city? How do we measure the value of murals that signal this is a community that is growing, expanding, and investing in itself? Those kind of things are a little harder to get a hold of because they're not bought and sold by the pound, they're felt. But yet, as an economist, that's part of our job to understand that. And the last thing to take away from it is the idea if we're going to broaden our economic base, the arts industry is a place to look and think in terms of being able to fund, support all the arts entrepreneurs who are out there. We like to pride ourselves in Wyoming as a go-to bunch of folks who like to do stuff from the grounds up. Well, these artists who are out there are doing just that. And they're in every corner of the state, and you can trip over them practically. There are so many artists around. And being an artist myself, any support we get just encourages us, gets us to want to even do more of it. And so whether it's private, public, some combination of these funds is going to help us diversify our economic base. It's going to help diversify our workforce, and it's going to help us build a leadership pipeline to understand what we want to have. And this industry, think of it as an industry, an arts industry, not just an arts world. If we can do that, we're going to go a long way in improving the depth of our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Sjogren. I really appreciate that. And I do appreciate we had a great chance to talk at our last TRW meeting, and the event you and your colleagues hosted. And I think it's really great for the committee to hear that and certainly dive into the report that was generated. There's some really great facts and figures in there. And especially with what my co-chair just mentioned, with 90% of our school districts currently declining in population, plus or minus. Public school math, but I do appreciate where you're coming from with that. It's really good information. So, committee, any questions?
Would it be okay if I just added a comment more?
Yep.
Just before we go to questions? My hope is that think of the Wyoming Arts Alliance like the Wyoming Stock Growers Association for the arts industry, right? And our intent in doing this in the partnership to do this economic review was to better understand the industry that we are representing and advocating for. And so the Wyoming Arts Alliance, in addition to this study, has done several touch points of conversation, focus groups, and surveys that helped us then go to our constituents and say, what is it that you are needing? And so what you'll find in that report that we provided, the state of the creative sector, we boiled down the themes that we're hearing and really identified 5 key areas that we tried to then say, these are some of the suggested points that we would have if we were really looking to sustain and grow the creative economy. I won't go in depth, although I think it's a fun read. We kept it to 20 pages and under. I bet you don't get that very often, right? And so I did just want to highlight, that there are some challenges that we are facing. And so those are noted. We then have identified really 3 main things that the Wyoming Arts Alliance is going to be focused on. There's actually about 20, but I'm highlighting 3 for you. And so those really are that we are going to move towards the creation of a statewide task force. Perhaps a few of you might be interested in working with us. Really, this is bringing together a group of decision makers in the state and stakeholders from the arts industry, and then working to identify what are the needs based on our available information, where do we have gaps in the information. And then phase 2 is really moving towards development of a creative economy strategic plan. So very much akin to the current ag initiative working group, and they're looking to identify some key focus areas. We are looking to do something similar to that. And our third project is we're really looking to develop a marketing campaign. One of the largest things that we heard from artists across the state is a need for increased visibility, and very much this sense that people don't understand the diversity of the types of art or, the people themselves who might be engaging in the art. And so we're hard at work of trying to give some visibility to the wide variety of arts. I don't know how many of you engage in arts. It's a wide umbrella, right? Either as a participant yourself or maybe an artist yourself. But we have a robust and unique arts industry, as Jay says. And so, we are hoping to highlight that through our marketing campaign called Art Powers Wyoming. So with that, I've given you a glimpse, but would like to leave time for questions because hopefully you had a chance to review the full report and the little summary we provided.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Really appreciate that. And Ms. Grant, do you have anything to add before we go to questions? All right. Senator, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. O'Neill. I actually attended one of the listening sessions, and even though the time of the day maybe wasn't perfect for a lot of people to get there, I thought it was very helpful. I appreciated the information on the economic benefits, and I think you hit the nail on the head. You just look at all these different organizations here, and I don't know that we're getting the kind of collaboration that we need yet. So everybody's talking, everybody knows what's going on, and I appreciate the idea of a task force. And so I just want to say thanks for the listening sessions. I thought they were very helpful.
Yes, and thank you, Senator, for your attendance.
Thank you, Senator Schuler. Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. So, Professor, I just wanted to thank you. It really opened my eyes earlier this year. And I've been around the block on the legislative front for quite some time. I remember Mike Massey passionately standing in front of the Senate and advocating on behalf of the arts and the humanities. And I just wasn't in tune as much as I should have been. And that even fine-tuned it more for me. This effort that you put together to show us the impact and and the economy of the arts in Wyoming, that's something we can take committee out on the floor of the House and the Senate when it comes time for budget discussion. We don't devote very much through our budget at the state level for what we're talking about today, but the little bit that we do, this gives us valuable information. And so I wanted to thank all three of you. This is a big deal, and it gives us something to put in our back pockets that we can share with our colleagues in the legislature. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Representative Harshman.
There we go. I think, echo the good chairman, the arts industry is a very powerful thing. And I think the numbers were really good, and I read those a while back, but just a quick question on that. You know, we've kind of beefed up the cultural trust fund. It's going to be a point where that's going to start kicking out some real money. And I guess just how's your relationship? How do you see that working? Or are there improvements we need to make on that? Thank you. That process.
Yeah, I'm not, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not on that board. I know as being a board member of the Wyoming Arts Council, we work a lot with the folks in the Cultural Trust Fund. And in my mind, what we're doing by creating the Cultural Trust Fund is creating a stock of resources that we can generate a flow that then we can invest across the state in what we think are going to have some big impacts, whether it happens to be improving theaters, providing marketing schemes for different artists, providing all the different things that fall through the crack when you're trying to create something and be a creative. You're not thinking about the business part of it. And I think that for a lot of artists in Wyoming, there's a gap between the music and the music business, and you just want to create your music. And how do you tie that together? And being able to create programs like the WIP program, the innovative partnership that we had, was an amazing way to invest these type resources to create business entrepreneurs. There was, I believe, 100 different people who participated in that program that were whittled down to 10 who have basically started their own businesses now, given, I believe, a $25,000 investment, a startup seed money to get them going. If we could do that and continue to do that and use the university as a hub to help the students understand that as they come through one of these programs, whether it's music, dance, whatever it is, that at the end of the day, they need a sustainable industry. And it might be that there is I think of it as an iceberg. You see the people on the stage, but there is a lot of people behind the scenes. And maybe they start behind the scenes before they're on the stage, but they need to know what they can do to be sustainable so they can stay put. A lot of the directors of the Wyoming Arts Centers now here in the state are Wyoming born, bred, educated. The Jackson Center up in Sheridan, you name it. So we are providing that, but we could do more.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Harshman.
Would I be able
Please.
to chime in on
Yep.
that?
Yes,
I just wanted to echo what Dr. Sjogren offered here and say that that's borne out in the survey results and conversations twofold. First, that there is a significant percentage of arts organizations and artists that are able to do what they do or who have launched their career through grant funding, either through the Wyoming Arts Council or the Cultural Trust. And so that we know. And they have identified the need in how do they better put to use some of those funds. So really building out the business and marketing skills that help them amplify the impact of those funds. So we work closely with the Wyoming Arts Council and the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, and just would echo that I think we know those funds are essential to the work that's happening within the arts industry.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to know if you could talk more to your idea about providing housing and well-being funds for artists and also low-cost insurance. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So this is something, thank you, Representative. Sorry, I'm so bad at that.
So this is something that came out in our community conversations and then again in the survey in terms of needs. And so, Dr. Sjogren was referencing, we really need entry points for artists and people working in arts and culture at all levels. And what becomes difficult is we have some communities where they're being priced out, right? That it is becoming unaffordable for artists to be living in those communities. And so Jackson, for example, was one where this was a big point of conversation. And so, really wanting the local people to be able to stay and participate in the arts community where they are from. And so housing was something that was mentioned again and again as a barrier to staying and adding to and contributing through their artistic contributions in the community that they're in. Insurance is also something that came up for them, that many of them, if they're working as independent artists. And so we have seen efforts in other states where they have created a collective that has worked to support artists and made insurance possible at an affordable rate. So there are ideas out there. Those weren't what the Wyoming Arts Alliance necessarily picked up to champion. Those are something that I think we'll talk more in depth with the task force. And I think there'll be alignment with initiatives that are already underway. As a community member in Laramie, I know there's many housing things that are in discussion on various levels with the county and the city. And so, but they were things that were mentioned that are important, that if we're looking to grow the arts industry, that is a piece of the conversation that we need to be having if we're looking to make it be something that attracts, retains, what have you, the other members of the arts community. Would you want to add anything to that, Dr. Sjogren?
No, I think a big part of this is figuring out what other states are doing, what other communities are doing. I know down in Austin, Texas, they have a health program for musicians down there because, the live music capital of the world, excuse me, Nashville, but it's Austin, they say. But what they've done is figured out how to build an umbrella for all the different live musicians so that they can have some affordable health care. That's a big part of it. Now, Austin's a bigger place, and can you take that and bring it back here and do it? That's what we're trying to figure out.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Connolly, for that question and great information there. Committee, any other questions of these great folks before we let them off the hook? All right, well, stick around close. We will quickly go to public comment. 11:50 following our agenda. Anyone want to comment on the Wyoming Arts Alliance update? Anyone online for that? Nope. We'll let some people filter out here before we tee up the Wyoming Arts Council update. With that, we'll close public comment, and now we'll go to Wyoming Arts Council update. And for the committee, please introduce yourselves and welcome.
Good morning, co-chairs and committee. I'm Sarah Sheen. I'm the Deputy Director for State Parks Cultural Resources, and I want to thank you for putting this on the agenda and taking time to talk about the arts today. Obviously want to thank the Wyoming Arts Alliance. They are incredible advocates, and Ryan spent a tremendous amount of time going around the state and having those meetings, and I think the value of it shows in that report that you all received. We did have another board member who I think had to go teach a class at the college here. So Valerie in Ellemayer was here. So nice to have her. I just wanted to make sure to recognize that she showed up. And I do want to throw out before I hand this over to Rachel that the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, there was a question about the trust fund. We have a meeting actually on Monday and Tuesday in Sheridan. And I know we sent invites to local legislators up there, that I know that one of them has said they would come, but I always welcome any of you to come and attend those meetings. They're online too, if you can just pop in. I think it's really good to see how that committee goes over the grants, vets them. It's a very thorough process. It would be, everyone's always glad that they've showed up and watched that process. So just want to invite you all. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Rachel Clifton, who's the director of the Wyoming Arts Council.
It may be on, just give it a tap. Oh, it's coming. Hold on, let them work. Yeah. Okay, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a trick. It's like April 1st, but not really. No.
Good morning, I guess, yes, technically still good morning, co-chairs and committee. Rachel Clifton, I'm the executive director of the Wyoming Arts Council. We are housed in the cultural resources half of State Parks and Cultural Resources. And I just appreciate you taking the time to hear from us this morning and today. Jay and Ryan and Lindsay gave a great overview of kind of the creative economy as a whole. And my goal in the next 10 or 15 minutes is to kind of contextualize the Arts Council, give you a little bit of oversight about what we do, and then connect the dots in terms of what we do at the state level in relation to that creative economy. So every state, every territory and jurisdiction has an official state arts agency. So we are one of 56 around the country. That gives us a really nice national network to check in with one another, learn what other states are doing, and see what's applicable to Wyoming. So we are a staff of 7, so we're pretty small. In addition to myself, we have 2 administrative positions that help with grants and marketing and events. And then we have 4 specialist positions. So they're the ones that are boots on the ground, working with individual artists, working with nonprofits all across the state. We also have a board of 10, so that's a Senate-approved board, advisory board. You've met 2 of them. We're here today. They are also positioned all across the state, which gives us really great community inroads. We move our board meetings all around the state so that we can engage with those communities. And our board members also are super engaged, do a great job of going out, attending arts events, supporting arts events, and many of them are artists themselves. So we do receive about 50% of our budget in federal funds through a partnership agreement with the National Endowment for the Arts. That's something that we apply to every year. We have to provide a strategic plan. We have to provide programmatic outline. But the National Endowment for the Arts has a congressional mandate to award 40% of its budget directly to those state and jurisdictional agencies. The formula funding for that is unknown. So our dollar amount does vary somewhat from one year to the next. But regardless of that, we are required to match those federal dollars with state dollars. It cannot be private funds. It has to be state dollars in an effort to supplement what we are receiving from the federal government. Last year, about 58% of our budget we turned around and awarded in grants to individuals and organizations all across the state. Our handout is not as succinct as the Arts Alliance is, but you all should have received our lovely 40-page handout. And at the back of that, there are county by county breakdowns that show employment numbers as well as the direct grant recipients of Arts Council dollars. So last year we were in 21 of 23 counties, and we're working really hard to get those last 2 counties to get grant dollars into those locations. Our May board meeting is going to be in Lusk so that we can start to build some of those inroads into Niobrara County. Annually, we offer 6 different grant programs. Most of those are available to nonprofits, municipalities, government entities, and school districts. We have 2 grant programs that are available to individual artists, but so for the most part, we are granting out to organizations. As the state arts agency, they are required to do arts programming. We do not fund things that are not arts related. But that doesn't mean that we can't fund things like Boys and Girls Clubs. If they are doing arts programming, we can fund the arts component of the work that they do. I want to talk a little bit about our grant processes because they are pretty robust and things that we have worked hard on over the years, both for an applicant standpoint and from a panelist standpoint to ensure that our processes are as equitable and transparent as possible. So we hire all of our grants are panel reviewed. So Arts Council staff takes a preliminary look at grant applications. We review for things like allowable and unallowable costs. Do the organizations meet those eligibility requirements? Are they up to date with the Secretary of State? All of those good things. And then the grants go to a panel. And those panels are constructed of individuals who are largely, I would say, have an arts background, but sometimes it's nice to have people who are less familiar with the arts, who can really go through those grant applications with a fine-tooth comb. We create a workbook for applicants to ease that administrative burden and address some of the questions that we field pretty often from applicants. We also create panelist handbooks so that panelists know what to expect. They know what makes a good grant application. We're providing them the criteria so they know exactly what they're scoring and evaluating and reviewing on. We also use our grants as a tool to learn from community members. So in addition to the grant applications themselves, of course, they have to do a final report. And so our staff reviews those final reports, pulls out comments, does follow-ups with grantees to answer questions that they may have. We're checking in with our grantees pretty regularly just to learn about what their needs are and to make sure that they're using those grant funds appropriately. In the last, I would say since fiscal year 2023, we are definitely seeing an increase in the number of grant requests and in the dollar amounts that folks are requesting. So that demonstrated need has continued to tick upwards over the last few years. We try to be as responsive as possible when we see things like that. I want to highlight our Creative Aging Project grant. We started this grant back in 2023. And these funds provide programming support either to individual teaching artists or to organizations, including libraries and senior centers, to offer 8-week sequential arts education classes specifically for Wyoming's older adults. I probably don't need to tell you all that Wyoming has the fastest growing population of older adults in the country. And so we are, of course, so I think it's no surprise that we're seeing a corollary increase in need for those grant funds. And so we have partnered with the state library, we've partnered with the aging division at the Department of Health to really maximize who's accessing those funds, where those dollars are going, and the impact that they can have. One other initiative that I want to highlight is our Youth Arts Council. This was just recently launched a few months ago. We have 15 high school students in our initial cohort from all across the state. There's actually a handful from here in Natrona County. But again, trying to adapt and respond to needs that we're seeing in communities and needs that we're hearing about from across the state. And part of that is workforce development and youth retention. So we're trying to get a foot in the door as early as we can with high school students. So they're going to be meeting monthly. They're going to do some leadership training. They're going to work on a creative project collectively that they self-select and work on. We asked them to fill out an application. Again, this was a panel review process where we asked them what their leadership skills are, what their current arts interests are, and then pulled this initial cohort together. So they're going to be working over the next year, like I said, on these projects, on developing these skills. And it's an opportunity for us to bring in arts professionals and for us to show them there is a path for you here in Wyoming in the arts. This is a viable career path for you. Here are the skills that we can help you develop to make you want to stay and work in Wyoming. So really just want to emphasize that we work closely with partners like the Arts Alliance and with those local arts organizations all across the state to be as adaptable as we can be. Sometimes, of course, that's a challenge at the state level to be as nimble as, we're not as nimble as a nonprofit, but we do take constituent feedback very seriously. We're constantly evaluating our programs, trying to figure out how we can be of assistance and what programs and projects we can develop. As a small staff, again, we're pretty nimble and have made it a point to hire staff that are experts in their areas of the arts as well. So they have done a great job, I would say, in recent years of developing new programs and initiatives, gathering feedback from, for example, independent musicians. What do they need? What are their challenges touring inside and outside of the state? What other professional development opportunities can we provide at the Arts Council? So with that, the one last thing I want to talk about is, as part of our partnership agreement with the National Endowment for the Arts, we are required to do a strategic plan. Our strategic plan is technically runs through 2027, but building on the momentum that the Arts Alliance has started to develop, we're going to start our strategic planning process next year. So we will probably be following up in many of your communities and doing some follow-up listening sessions, surveys, really just trying to gauge where people are now in this window of time and what their community needs are and how we as the State Arts Agency can help meet them. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clifton. That was a lot to download, and I know our committee did it. And we just, on behalf of the committee, thank you and thank your staff for everything you do. And I know those strategic plans are a big lift, and it's great to hear from both of you. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the committee will have a few questions, and then we will open it for public comment. Representative Harshman, please.
Mr. Chairman, just thanks for being here, and quick question, just as we get ready for the budget session, just maybe remind the committee about the appropriation, where it is, how much it is, and what kind of funds our operation. And again, appreciate you, all the service in Wyoming on our boards and councils across states, really commendable. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Co-Chair. So last budget fiscal year, our general fund appropriation was just over $2 million. And our federal grant amount in that same window of time was $1.9 million. So when we're talking about needing state funds to match that federal, to meet that federal match, we're right there. We're right at that 1-to-1 match. Yes.
That's 2-year budget.
That's 2-year budget. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman. Just to say it again, so every up to the 1.9 million, our state dollars are doubled.
Yes, Representative, Mr. Co-Chair, that's correct.
That'd be 100% return. Just saying it another way. Very nice investment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Harshman.
Take that on the floor.
Yep, yeah, for sure. And Mr. Co-Chairman, I did speak about that. That is, those are great figures to have and great for us to remember as we head to the budget session. Committee, any other questions? Representative Connolly.
It's a surprise.
Never a surprise.
So my heart kind of sticks with the old folks, the senior centers and things like that. So if the senior center wants to apply, do they do that through the Department of Health Aging Division, or do they, how does that work exactly?
That's
Because I think it's a great program.
Yes, thank you, Representative. Mr. Co-Chair, that's a fantastic question because it can take a couple of different forms. We do have our Creative Aging Project Grant. Senior centers can apply directly to us for those funds. Some senior centers can also work directly with the Aging Division to use, I believe it's their Title III funds to implement creative aging programming. So that was part of the partnership that we developed with the Aging Division, was for them to essentially authorize senior centers to use their Title III funds through the Department of Health. What we have found is that there are some capacity issues at the senior centers just in terms of staffing and time and availability. We're in the process of actually applying for another grant at the federal, it's a federal grant through one of our federal partners, where we would take that burden back off of senior centers and would reduce the administrative burden of doing things like finding a teaching artist or producing marketing materials, outreach materials. So we're looking for ways that we can make that process a little easier, specifically for senior centers.
Thank you, Representative Connolly. Thank you for the answer. Representative Thayer.
Thank you. Welcome, Director. Thank you for all you guys do. And question, maybe a little public service announcement. Kind of segueing from a representative's question on the grant application. There used to be a process, if you were a new applicant, you guys had the review, like you could submit your grant earlier to get some feedback for a stronger, and it was wonderful. When we started writing grants, it was a big help. Is that still possible?
Yes, Representative Thayer, Mr. Co-Chair. Yes, absolutely. We encourage grantees to reach out, especially first-time grantees or in instances of the community support grant, if they don't receive funding, if they don't score high enough to receive funding, we encourage them to reach out to us and we can help them. We make the panelist comments available to them so that they can read through them and see that specific feedback to make a stronger application for the next year.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you both. Any departing comments, or we're going to go ahead and open it for public comment. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open public comment on the Wyoming Arts Council update. Anyone in the room want to comment on this? Don't be shy that you're standing between or potentially talking between now and lunch. We'll get there. Anyone online for this topic? Thank you all for being here. With that, I'll close public comment. Mr. Co-Chair, it's 12:08. I guess I have a question of Ryan. Do we know if the Office of Tourism was able to get on the road earlier and will be here? Do we have confirmation there?
Mr. Chairman, I believe they can be here earlier than the 1:45 start time.
Okay, well, committee, it is 12:08. Our agenda says 1:45. I know a number of us have some very long drives that daylight savings include dark travel amongst large critters. So I would like to propose, unless you guys start throwing your water balls at me, moving our next topic up to 1:15. And if they are not here, we can certainly go into some committee directives and talk about some of our personal bills we may have. But I know that's tight. It gives us 1 hour, but I would really appreciate it. Certainly a selfish request to change that agenda, but I got a big mountain to drive over with a lot of animals. So if there's no objections to that, we will move lunch up to, our second afternoon session up to 1:15, if that's all right, LSO. Great, thank you. And with that, we will adjourn for lunch and we'll see you at 1:15.